The story of our heroes begins in one of the educational institutions, with a huge number of students. In one of the classrooms, there was a group of several people talking among themselves. But one guy from the group sat apart, as if he had been excluded from everyone else. Suddenly, a man crossed the threshold of the classroom. The guy sitting apart from everyone glanced at the person who had just entered. That person, holding a phone in his hands, turned to the people inside and asked them to greet a boss named Hoy. Everyone sitting at their desks greeted him and invited him to join them. One of the students approached him and asked if Hoy was selling something new, and he replied that it was obvious. Then he turned the screen of his cell phone toward her and showed her his account balance, which showed that he had earned 48 million. The girl's mouth opened in surprise, and her eyes widened, because 48 million won is an extremely large amount. Hearing about the amount that Hoy had managed to earn, one of the guys remarked that Hoy would definitely be treating everyone this Friday. Hoy himself listened to everyone admiring, but nevertheless remained serious, because he wanted to point out one very important thing. Looking at the guy sitting alone, he said that first they needed to finish one thing. Hoy approached him, and while tugging at Park Han-yoon's hair, addressed him. Hoy didn't stand on ceremony with Park Han-yoon, and simply slammed his face right into the desk he was sitting at. He repeated the same movement several times, telling him that he had asked him to make a new purchase. And since Park Han-yoon didn't do it for some reason, Hoy thought he wanted to ruin his business. Then he lifted his head by his hair to look him straight in the eye, and said that such actions must be warned about. The girl suggested that Hoy stop talking about this topic, and jokingly remarked that the teacher would scold him for it. Hoy then said that teachers are people too, and the question is only how much it costs to buy them. Then he thought that if the teachers found out, he would cause a bloodbath. Hoy saw Park's gaze and thought he wanted to hit it. Hoy continued to beat Park and said that if Park complained to the teachers, he would pay him back in full. Hoy said that Park had lost to Chen Su, and now he had gone crazy, and asked if that was what he wanted. All this happened 2 years ago, when there was a gang of high school students that the whole country knew about. This team was called Nexus, and Hoy was their leader, and then Park started a war. Park thought he had won, but the members of Nexus sued him. Due to a well-thought-out line of accusations and falsified evidence, he lost. In order to pay compensation, Park's father had to sell the gym that had been his home his entire life. After that incident, Park vowed never to allow himself to fight again. That day, he asked his father for forgiveness, and his father hugged him tightly and said that men should not cry. Everyone then knew Park as the man who fought with Nexus, and thought he had become a fool after that fight. One of the group then approached Park and said he was glad to meet him. He asked Park to look at the ring on his finger, and asked if he knew anything about it. When Park did not respond, he was again subjected to insults and attacks. One of the group began to beat him, not believing that this was really the same Park who had fought with Nexus. Suddenly, the man suggested that Park was indeed a fool, and moreover, had been born that way. He couldn't believe that Park had really fought with Nexus, comparing him to a weakling. Then he noted that Park's father had probably just paid his way out of the situation, but Park seemed unwilling to listen to the taunts, and grabbed his opponent's leg tightly in his hand. Park held his leg while apologizing to his opponent. Park noted that his opponent had probably learned to speak while letting go of his leg. That guy seemed to be afraid of Park, which his comrades noticed after seeing his gaze. Catching himself thinking this, he reached for a wooden block lying nearby. He raised his wooden weapon and swung it swiftly at Park. It wasn't long before the scoundrel began running the object across Park's face, comparing his writhing movements to a worm. After he finished beating Park, they continued on their way. Suddenly, someone appeared next to Park and started a conversation with him, saying that he did not understand his actions at that moment. He leaned closer to Park and asked what he was doing at that moment. He was curious why Park did not resist and allowed those scoundrels to simply walk away with their crimes unpunished. He told Park that if he were in his place, he would simply break them. Then he opened a bag with a huge amount of money in front of him, saying that he would give him money to sue them. Then the man said that if he didn't want to sue, he could defeat them and make them pay. Then he picked up a wad of cash and asked how much Park would need to defeat those scoundrels. But suddenly Park looked up at him and asked who he was. But the man looked away and said that he was the one who dreamed of saying goodbye to Chen Su. Then he suggested postponing the conversation for a while, because there were many ears around. When the scoundrels returned, they saw an incredible amount of real money. They were curious where Park could have gotten so much cash. Then the one who had beaten Park said that Park could have told him about the money right away, and then he could have been gentler. But this time Park did not remain silent, and aimed his elbow strike right at his opponent's face. When that scoundrel fell to the ground completely unconscious, his remaining comrades did not understand what was happening. Park said at that moment that he was able to defeat his opponent in just 4 seconds of his life. When Park began to rush towards the rest of the group, they asked him to stop. They tried to explain to him that they had not touched or insulted him, but were simply observers. But these explanations were not enough to stop Park, and then they too were able to feel Park's strength. It didn't take long for Park to defeat them, and they ended up on the ground in a horizontal position along with their friend. Park looked at the man who had offered him money and said that now no one would interfere with their conversation. In response, the rich man asked Park who he was. Before long, the two found themselves in an office on a high floor, and the man asked Park if he watched the news. Then he opened a link on his phone, showing that it was him. The phone contained information about Oh Jun-woo, who was the youngest creator and owner of a conglomerate in Korea. Oh Jun-woo said that he was the one who had tens of thousands of checks that he used instead of napkins. In order not to waste time, he asked Park if he knew how Chen Su's life was going. He talked about Nexus, who was born a professional player, who was talented and handsome, and who was written about in the newspapers. Oh Jun-woo found it funny that the player Kim Chen-su was considered a star in Korea. He said that even now, Nexus manages to command thugs and play the gangster. Oh Jun-woo spoke of Nexus as someone who destroyed Park's life, and moreover, simply took it away. Oh Jun-woo said that it would be no trouble for him to destroy Nexus, but there was one catch. He said that he intended to crush Nexus using his own dirty, cheap, and disgusting methods, and leave him at the bottom. He promised that from now on, all of Park's expenses for the rest of his life would be on him, so that he would be with him on his journey. Then Oh Jun-woo said that he was looking for Park for this very purpose. Oh Jun-woo was curious as to why Park felt such intense hatred toward Nexus. Without waiting for an answer, he promised Park that he would provide him with financial support in exchange for his fists and his ability to defend himself in a fight. And then Park walked into the classroom just as Nexus was asking if anyone had any extra teeth. At that moment, he was explaining that they had a common enemy, and so he told everyone to buy clothes worth 300,000 rubles. He addressed everyone, talking about the members of Nexus at school, and saying that he was ready to kill them if he didn't see the money in his account. Everyone started talking about how he wasn't joking, and that everyone really needed to buy all these things. When he saw Park, he asked why he was staring at him, reminding him of their previous encounter. But then Park stopped listening and just punched him right in the face with all his might. Everyone in the classroom at that moment was extremely shocked by what was happening. At that moment, everyone sitting at their desks turned around very carefully, peeking cautiously. Nexus himself then stood up and continued to fight Park, saying that he had nothing to fear in this world. At that time, he believed that there was no one stronger than him, but that belief lasted only until he met Park Han-yoon. Then he felt with every fiber of his being that he didn't stand a chance against him. At one point, it even seemed to him that Park Han-yoon was not a human being at all, but a real beast. But then he met Kim Cheon-su, who forced him to grovel in search of money. And it was then that he realized that having a huge amount of money was the best thing on the planet. After all, nothing is impossible for the rich, and he understood that perfectly well. It turned out that he had opened his own clothing store and forced school children to buy from it. In this way, he managed to amass a fortune and force Park Han-yoon to obey him. And that's when he returned to his status as a real predator. And then he couldn't believe what was happening, because at some point Park stopped obeying him and started hitting him. It was extremely humiliating for him, because Park was beating him up right in front of the whole class. Then he turned to Ju Yan-woong and asked him to hold Park so that he could answer him. But Ju Yan-yoon didn't even think about doing that when he saw Park's gaze, which made him afraid. And then he had no choice but to take out his camera phone and threaten Park that he could do what he did last time. But Park just kept hitting him, and fearing that he might lose his life, he simply ran out of the office. As he ran away from the office, he tried to calm himself down by reminding himself that he was the boss. He began to think that Park hadn't fought for 2 years, but had only been groveling. He realized that he had to find an athlete who could handle him, and remembered Park Si-woon, who would do anything for money. When Park Si-woon saw him, he immediately asked what had happened to his face. He began to scream for help and to be saved. But it wasn't long before his attacker was right behind him. He shouted to Si-woon that he was willing to give him 1,000,000 won if he could deal with his attacker. Without thinking twice, he said he was willing to do it for 2,000,000 won. He was willing to pay that amount of money to get what he wanted. Then he approached Han-yoon and apologized for agreeing, explaining that it was too expensive for his education. Park responded by taking out a wad of cash and giving it to his rival, asking him not to get involved. He gave him a huge amount of money and asked him to step aside. And when he left, Nexus again began to get what he deserved from Park. At some point, a man appeared in the corridor who was able to witness the whole scene. Seeing this, he was taken aback and asked for an explanation of what was going on. His expression changed dramatically, and he turned to Park Han-yoon and shouted, asking if he understood what he had done. When they were both in the principal's office, he couldn't understand how Park had allowed himself to act this way. He shouted that when Park was a freshman, he let everything slide and allowed him to stay in school. Nexus just rejoiced as he heard the principal promise not to let Park off the hook this time. Park just sat silently and listened, as the principal told him that he should be ashamed of himself in front of his father. But suddenly, he got up from his chair and struck Nexus again, shocking the principal. The principal tried to restrain Park, but he was not very successful. Suddenly, another person appeared in the office, who also watched the whole scene. He entered the office and asked Park Han-yoon to slow down. Park listened to his instructions and calmly sat down in his seat, waiting for further instructions. It was clear from the principal's eyes that he had no idea what was going on, or who the man who had just entered was. The man greeted him and introduced himself as Kim Byung-kwon, a lawyer from the most influential law firm in Korea. The principal immediately wondered what could have brought Kim Byung-kwon to their school. After talking with the lawyer, the principal apologized to Park. The scoundrel Hoi was immediately expelled from the school. A little later, during a conversation between Kim Byung-gun and Park, Kim said that he thought it was all too easy for Hoi. He explained that it should have been revenge for 2 years of bullying Park, and that he should have paid dearly for it. Park became curious about what had happened to the principal, and asked Kim Byung-gun about it. Kim Byung replied that it was quite easy to make him agreeable. This was because he had many sins to his name, and when reminded of them, he agreed to all the conditions. Kim then explained that it was only a matter of time before Hoya ended up behind bars. He said that at the moment, it was better to keep him close, so that it would be easier to send him to a juvenile detention center. He also explained that he plans to send the school principal to a not-so-distant place. He said that he does not pay taxes to support teachers like that. Then he turned to Park with a question about whether he managed to refresh himself by letting out his anger, and noted that he should be grateful for that. Park replied that there was some truth in this, as he had indeed managed to let off some steam. Kim Byung then pointed out that he and Park had a lot of work ahead of them, for which he would be able to thank him. After that, he said that the phrase, "I'm glad to meet you, Park," would be more appropriate in this case. Park, in turn, just looked at him sidelong. Meanwhile, at home, Hoi banged his fists on the table in anger, remembering Park Han-young with very unkind words. He promised himself then that he would not give up and would not leave this situation unattended. He made a promise to himself to simply take Park Han-young's life. He walked down the street and stopped in front of one of the buildings directly in front of him. He approached one of the doors, and the person who opened it cautiously peered through the crack, not understanding who was visiting him. Then he introduced himself as President Hoi and said he intended to check on his order. When the man realized that President Hoi himself was standing in front of him, he invited him in, noting that he had arrived just in time. He turned back and informed Jin-soon that President Hoi had arrived. It was Hwang Jin's son, a fugitive from the Bimo-will family. The man standing in front of him, covered in bruises, told Mr. Hoi that he had wanted this himself and that this was only the beginning. Then, picking up a bat, he delivered the final blow and ordered the guys to clean up the room because they had a guest. Then they turned to Hoi and asked him the reasons for his visit. They were extremely curious because Hoya had never come in person before. He explained that he had come on his own because there was a rather large order. They noted that this was a very kind gesture on the part of the president and asked how large the order would be. He looked at them and with a serious expression on his face, stated that the order was worth 10 million won. And then, of course, one of them wanted to fulfill his order right away because the amount was really huge and attracted him. But suddenly Jin-sung hit his friend, who agreed to fulfill Hoi's order without his opinion. He did this because he considered this price too low for him. Jin-sung turned to Hoi with a question about the apparently difficult personality of the person who had placed the order, judging by the high amount of payment. Then Hoi named Park Han-yoon, waiting for Jin-sung's further reaction on this matter. Hearing this name, Jin-sung assumed that Hoi had definitely lost his mind. Hoi told him that the 10 million won was only a deposit for the job. He then promised to double the amount if the two could handle it. Jun-sung, sensing easy money, felt excited and accepted the job. Some time passed, and Kim returned home and shouted that he had arrived as he took off his shoes. He went inside and apologized for not seeing each other for a long time because he had a lot of work to do, and said that he had bought a chicken. Then he offered to try the fried chicken, which was so delicious that it would make you lose your mind. He looked at the portrait and said that his wife's father had once cooked roast chicken, and it was amazing. Then he said that he hadn't eaten chicken for 2 years, and now he wouldn't mind trying it again. He lowered his head and repeated sadly that 2 years had passed since then. At that moment, it seemed to him that this time had passed in an instant. After sitting for a while, he stood up and abruptly began to leave, saying that he would not be back soon because he had a lot to do. Then he glanced back, saying that the preparations were already complete. The room he was in was sealed, and he was met by a man who told him that Hoi had made a move and was inquiring about further actions. Kim Byung replied replied that he did not understand these matters, and that his assistant must definitely know what they needed to do next. The assistant, in turn, replied that he had asked the question just in case. Park was also at home with his father, who was talking to someone on the phone, mentioning high earnings. After agreeing to meet the next day, he hung up the phone. Disconnecting from the phone call, he told his son Park that he had managed to get a new job, and Park modestly congratulated him. Park Han-yoon then continued to listen silently, as his father rejoiced that they would soon be rich thanks to his new job. Park then got up and told his father that he was going to training, and his father asked him to come back early so they could spend the evening together. As Park Han-yoon was walking down the stairs, his phone rang in his jeans pocket. When he answered the call, the person on the other end said that Hoy had made a move. Kim Bom told him about his suspicions that Hoy had hired the fugitives, but explained that there should be no problems. He then ended the conversation by asking Park Han-yoon to warn him if those people showed up. As he left the building, Park Han-yoon paused for a moment. He then immediately informed Kim Byum that the people he had mentioned had already come to see him. When Park Han-yoon stepped outside, the group of fugitives was already waiting for him. The leader of the group immediately addressed Park and said he was glad to meet him. Park, in turn, without finishing the conversation, asked these people who they were. Turning his head to the side, he saw a car with bright headlights rushing towards him. The man in the car was pressing the gas pedal and shouting that he was driving towards millions. Park was not afraid and ran straight towards the moving car. Then, with a single kick of his foot, he tried to stop the car at high speed. It wasn't long before Park was flying after the car. The group began to discuss his behavior and decided he was a masochist, but the gang leader wasn't so sure. He understood that there was something else going on here. When Park Han-yoon got up from the ground, he made it clear to everyone that he was furious at that moment. When people in the windows started shouting about what they had seen, the gang leader ordered everyone to leave, otherwise it could be dangerous. Getting into the car last, he told Han-yoon that they would definitely meet again. And when the car started to drive away, Han-yoon didn't stand rooted to the spot, but ran after them. They all found it funny to see Han-yoon trying with all his might to catch up with a car that, in their opinion, was many times faster than him. Imagine their surprise when they realized that Han-yoon had managed to catch up with them after all. Han-yoon caught up with them, jumped on the car, and started punching it. It wasn't long before the car windows began to shatter in all directions. Then, after getting inside, he began to pull everyone out of the car, one by one. Even though one of the gang members was left alone with Han-yoon, they decided to continue without him. When the man who had fallen out of the car came to, he realized that Park Han-yoon was standing over him. Park looked at him with rage in his eyes and asked the guy where the rest of his gang had gone. The guy was extremely frightened and replied that he had no information about their further movements. Of course, Park Han-young was not satisfied with the answer he was given, and so, after hitting him, he asked him the same question again. But the man still remained silent and did not want to betray his comrades despite the beatings. Park, in turn, did not stop and asked him the same question over and over again. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang had already reached their destination and were drinking in a joyful mood. The gang leader noted that they had done a good job, but asked his comrades not to get too drunk. Hoy believed that there was no reason to be happy because they had failed to deal with Park Han-yoon. Then they began to think about what might happen if Park came straight to them. They were convinced that Park was not stupid enough to come to them in his current state. Then he told Hoy that he shouldn't get angry over such trifles. He told Hoy that in order to deal with Park, they would need a pack of dogs. And by that he meant a group of angry people. He suggested that they should act in such a way as to drive him to despair, so that he would want to take his own life. But their assumptions turned out to be wrong, because the door to their room began to collapse from the blows of Park Han-yoon, who had arrived. Then they began to notice more and more dents appearing on the front door. One of them got up and went to the door, and looked through the peephole to see what was happening outside. It turned out that Park Han-yoon was standing there, holding one of the guys from their group by the hair. Of course, they were all extremely surprised and frightened, and began to look for their weapons to defend themselves. The leader of their group told them not to worry, because he was sure that the door would not be easy to break down, and thought that Park would leave soon. When the sounds subsided, everyone thought that Park had indeed left, and given up trying to get to them. But suddenly, one of them changed his expression, as if he had seen something terrifying. He could see Park climbing onto the balcony, and this became a real problem for them. It wasn't long before Park broke the windows in the room and entered. They were all amazed, because their room was on the 3rd floor, and he still managed to get there. Without further explanation, and in order not to waste time, Park Han-yoon began to attack everyone he saw in front of him. Everyone who was in the room at that moment only had time to fly in different directions from Park Han-yoon's blows. After dealing with several opponents, he invited the next group to come and get their share of blows. The leader of the gang stood and thought about how he had messed up, and noticed that Park was not the least bit afraid. He immediately made a decision, and ordered the guys from his gang to take Park Han-young. They immediately followed their mentor's order, but it did not lead to anything good for them. When one of them found himself directly under Park Han-young, with his throat under his hand, he shouted to his comrade to finish Park off. Without wasting any time, he hit him on the head with a bat, breaking his skull. Imagine his surprise when he discovered that his wooden weapon had broken in half. Less than a minute later, Park Han-young threw him out the window. When he landed on the ground, a motorcycle pulled up. When the motorcycle stopped, the girl who was driving took off her helmet and jokingly remarked that it was all very scary. The man lying on the ground looked at her through his closed eyelids and thought that he had lost his life and that his end had come. When she approached him, he thought he was in paradise when he saw the beautiful girl next to him. The girl only asked him where Park Han-young was. He replied that Park was upstairs, while asking her for her phone number. She sat down on her motorcycle and called someone, asking for further instructions, saying that she had found Park, who was destroying someone's house. On the other end of the line was Kim Byum, who asked her for the exact address. She turned to the director, jokingly asking him why he was so curious about all this, and asked him to answer her question first. She was worried about choosing between two new handbags and needed help deciding. The director listened silently as she agonized over her choice, and so she couldn't tell him the exact location. Then he said that he had transferred money to her to make her choice easier and to get the long-awaited location. She looked up at the room where the sounds that gave away his location were coming from. Meanwhile, in that room, almost all the scoundrels who had tried to attack Park Han-young had already been defeated. And then the leader of the group decided to admit aloud that they had really screwed up. But he became curious and asked Park why he hadn't touched him, since he had a perfect opportunity to do so. He looked him straight in the eye and said that he could give Park anything he wanted, whether it was money or power. But Park replied that he was wrong in every statement and assumption he had made. Then he simply grabbed him by the throat and lifted him straight up. He threw him straight onto the floor, making it clear that his punishment was only a matter of time. Then someone burst into the room and, grabbing Park's arm, shouted at him to stop. It turned out to be the owner of the house, who tearfully begged him to stop destroying everything around him. He cried bitter tears and asked them to go outside to continue fighting, because he had nothing to do with it and was left without parents. He said that he had had enough of people who were simply entertaining themselves in his house, and that he didn't need Park destroying his home as well. He shouted, asking to be told what he had done wrong and why he deserved this. It wasn't long before director Kim Byum appeared in the room. Upon entering, he noted the mess and chaos that Park Han-young had created, saying that the sight in the room was extremely frightening. The owner of the apartment, with tears in his eyes, asked if this man was the one who had ordered all this to be done in his house. He introduced himself as the director of a large law firm and promised to compensate for all the damage fivefold. He looked at him and without hesitation said that he needed 10 million won. The director himself, without hesitation, took a wad of cash out of his pocket and gave the poor orphan 50 million won. The leader of the gang watched what was happening and couldn't understand how Park Han-young could be so strong, comparing him to a real monster. He suddenly realized that he needed to get away and quickly got up and headed for the balcony, but Park Han-young saw his movements. Then he ran and jumped straight down from the third floor of the building. But Park Han-young was not only strong, but also fast. As he managed to grab the fleeing man by the edge of his jacket, he began to pull him back, saying that he was not done with him yet. The leader of the group understood that if Park managed to drag him upstairs, it would definitely be the end for him. And then he could think of nothing better than to get his weapon and use it to unhook Park's arm. Then he thought he was lucky because he managed to escape. But this decision was rash because he was unable to regroup to avoid injury during the fall and ended up on the ground next to his comrade. Still, he managed to get up and, holding his injured shoulder, moved on, trying to get away. The director, watching what was happening from the balcony, was amazed at that man's will to survive. Suddenly, the man who had been defeated in the corner of the room laughed loudly, saying that Park and his director were in big trouble. Park Han-young and Kim Byum turned around and waited for an explanation, because they had no idea what the man was talking about. It turned out that the guy meant that they had gotten themselves into big trouble, because they were just cogs in this big and dangerous system. He explained that the guy's father was the director of the High-Woon Company, and that dealing with fishermen was very dangerous. When he said that the company had enough money to wipe out Bam and Park, they began to look at him with interest, and he replied sarcastically that, judging by all appearances, they probably hadn't been lucky. When the fugitive finally managed to reach his destination, the first thing he did was go to his father. His father was the director of the company, Hwang Hae-yoon. He approached his son and, seeing what had happened to him, demanded an explanation and the names of his attackers. He then looked at his father and asked him to deal with those two for what they had done to him. And when his father said that his son might regret it for the rest of his life, he replied that he didn't care at all. His father jokingly remarked that his son was not in the most enviable position to ask for help. His father asked his son to lift his head and said that in such a situation, any hint of weakness or insincerity would repel anyone. Then he asked him to think about what he needed and to ask for help only when he was ready to risk everything. He turned to his father and said that he intended to take the lives of his offenders at any cost, no matter what. His father smiled as if that was exactly what he wanted to hear. Returning to his business, he immediately called Chief Kim to try to resolve the issue. He called Chief Kim and ordered him to bring him 2 barrels. At the same time, he said on the phone that he needed to teach some people a lesson. It wasn't long before a bunch of cars headed toward the guy who gave the order. It was a bunch of people who rushed over and brought the promised 2 barrels. When they got together, they came to Park and Kim Byam, who didn't understand why so many people were involved in teenage fights. He then explained that those very teenagers had expressed a desire to take their own lives. Kim Byam replied that no one here was planning to say goodbye to their lives. When director Hwang Hae-yoon realized who was standing in front of him, he couldn't believe his eyes. The leader of that company immediately called his director and said that they had clearly run into problems. He was told on the phone that all deals with DJ Company for the second half of the year had been completely canceled. And when he was told that the company president had personally called and canceled every deal, the director yawned demonstratively. He realized that they were in serious trouble and fell to his knees, begging the president to show them mercy. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events and asked what to do next, because they had come here to fight, not to apologize. Director Kim noted that his rival was quick to grasp the situation and therefore proposed the following solution to the problem. First, he ordered the removal of the trash that was currently standing behind him. And when everyone left, that man tearfully begged the president not to treat him that way. He looked at him and said that he didn't want to do it, but he couldn't allow the company's image to be disgraced. He said he couldn't work with a partner whose son was a second-rate gangster. He promised to send his son abroad, saying that he would never return to Korea. And when his son objected, he immediately received a punch from his father right in the face. Director Kim sarcastically suggested that Park take a look at them, noting that it was not surprising that his son had gone astray. Then, Director Kim told them to stop, saying that sending his son abroad would not benefit anyone. Instead, he told him to fulfill several conditions in exchange for his reconsideration of future deals. And then he talked about the 50 million won he had lost because of his son. And so the first condition was that his son had to work off all that money himself, down to the last penny. But the father did not understand how his untalented son could earn such a huge amount of money. But obviously, Kim had his own rather cunning plan in this regard, which was confirmed by his sly smile. He reminded him that he was a fisherman, and therefore suggested taking his own son on a deep-sea fishing trip where they paid well. The son himself understood that his situation was definitely bad, but he had no choice. It wasn't long before Kim Byam's first condition began to be fulfilled. Later, when Park and Kim were in the office, Park noted that Kim was definitely acting like a real villain, but Kim responded by asking Park not to get involved in problems where money might be involved. Park Han-yoon replied that he was not involved in such matters anyway. But then the girl who had been on the bike appeared behind them and asked Park not to play the hero, as the abrasions on his back were visible. Then Kim introduced Park to an Instagram star who was their informant and who would now work with them to destroy Nexus. This girl's name was Cho So-hyun, who had 570 followers on the network. She turned to Park and said that, according to rumors, he looked like a gangster, but she had a completely different opinion. However, she also added that Park seemed much more attractive to her than she had thought and imagined. The director turned to Cho So-hyun, reminding her that they were at work and asking her not to waste time. She agreed, saying that despite everything, she preferred gangsters to handsome men. Then she leaned back and asked him to tell her why he had called her here. The director replied that he had invited her to discuss further details of their joint venture. The director added that Nexus was now much stronger than they could imagine, and that they would not be able to defeat them alone. Therefore, he suggested putting together a team of the best fighters. Then he talked about a book that listed the people they needed from Donghyun High School, who were connected to Nexus. The director explained that he was talking about Kim Dong-hyun. He explained that while Park was fighting Nexus, he was among those who remained until the very end. It was the former #1 student of Donghyun High School, Kim Dong-hyun. Despite the fact that after that battle, his knees were in bad shape and he couldn't walk, he still managed to survive the battle. And then Director Kim explained that they needed him on their team. Hoi is now in a juvenile detention center, and therefore will no longer be able to sell anything. And that is why it will become much more difficult for Nexus to raise money. Then they started talking about how Hoi ended up where he is now. They all knew that Park Han-yoon was behind it. Then the top student at Donghyun High School, Min Kyung-chol, asked for more details. They began to discuss how quickly Park had broken his promise to lay low and no longer get involved in conflicts. Suddenly, someone ran in to report some extremely urgent and important news. They had just been informed that Park Han-yoon was transferring to their school, which came as a surprise to the whole group. And when Park showed up at his new school, he greeted everyone and said he had come to destroy them. The teacher looked around the classroom to find a seat for Park and suggested he sit at the back desk. And then Park, with a serious look on his face, calm and unperturbed, went to the very back desk. The person sitting at that desk greeted Park and said that he had long dreamed of meeting him. It was Donghyun High School's number 12 student named Ju Woo Min. He said that Min Kyung Chol told him not to mess with Park, and he noticed that a big guy like him was afraid of Park. Then he told Park Han-yoon that he wouldn't mind fighting him once. He explained that this way, he intended to verify the truth of the rumors circulating about him. Park Han-yoon responded to everything Ju Woo Min said with simple silence, ignoring his interlocutor. Ju Woo Min himself interpreted Park's behavior as meaning that Park never strikes first. But Park Han-yoon's silence did not suit him, so he took him by the arm and asked him to say something. Park immediately turned around and struck him in the face with his elbow, preventing him from touching him. All the other students immediately turned around to see what was happening at the back of the classroom, as they heard a loud noise coming from there. Park Han-yoon then lay down on his desk and told everyone that it would be better for them not to wake him up. Meanwhile, a girl from the Nexus Destruction group was arguing that, in her opinion, Kim Dong-hyun was not needed. She didn't understand why they needed him, because she thought there were plenty of normal and strong guys around. And then she remembered that he was Park's friend. The director was playing baseball at the time, and told the girl the first thought that came to mind when he heard the name Kim Dong-hyun. The first word that came to mind was resilience. By steadfastness, he meant his unwavering determination in a fight, despite his small stature. But he also noted that solid things are not inherently durable, because sooner or later, they break without flexibility. The girl became even more confused, because she didn't understand why they needed this cripple. But the principal only replied that he believed in this man, despite all the obvious circumstances. He said that someone who had been broken once could no longer be as strong as before. He said even if he couldn't be strong, he could become many times more dangerous than he had been. After class, Park Han-yoon went to the place where all the influential young people of the school gathered. Everyone looked at the new member of their school with particular caution and suspicion. Suddenly, he saw a man running with all his might down the school corridor. Park Han-yoon immediately noticed him and stared at him intently. Then he saw one of the students attack him and kick him right in the stomach. The one who hit him said that he was probably late on purpose. He grabbed him by the hair and scolded him for being 5 minutes late from the store because he had a lot of money to pay back. But when there was no response, he started hitting him again. His friends sarcastically asked him to stop, because if he kept hitting him, he would make the guy completely lose his ability to think. Then he started filming the poor guy on his phone, saying that his legs hurt, and that's why he took so long to go to the store. Then he decided to hit him a few more times to scare the guy and make him more alert. Park Han-yoon just stood and watched what was happening from the sidelines. Meanwhile, Director Kim and his partner were still talking about the need for Kim Dong-hyun in their company. She was munching on chips, saying that she wasn't sure Park Han-yoon would get along with Kim Dong-hyun. She was curious why it was impossible to solve everything with money this time. Director Kim replied that everything would be much easier if Kim Dong-hyun could be bought. It turned out that the reason Kim Dong-hyun got involved in the fight was only because Park was involved in it. He said that Kim Dong-hyun would fight to the end for his friends and feel all their pain as if it were his own. Time passed, and Kim Dong-hyun sat down on a bench to rest, and an object fell out of his pocket and flew quite far away from him. Suddenly, Park appeared right next to him, still as calm as ever. Park looked at him and then said he was glad to see him. Kim Dong-hyun told him about the rumors circulating about Park and the reasons for his transfer to this school. Kim Dong-hyun told Park that Nexus had become much stronger and that their money and power were no match for it. Then he turned his head toward Park Han-yoon and said that the outcome would be the same. They would lose. Park disagreed with this statement because he believed that this time they would definitely win. Kim Dong-hyun seemed unwilling to hear this, and, as he was leaving, told Park that knowing the outcome, he would not have fought. Park listened silently as Kim Dong-hyun told him that it was because of that fight that he became disabled. Park responded by saying that he intended to prove him wrong. Meanwhile, someone was watching Park's actions from a window, trying to figure out what he was up to. Suddenly, a large group from the school gathered, intending to deal with Park Han-yoon. Later, Kim Dong-hyun went to a psychologist for psychotherapy. The fact was that he was trying to avoid surgery with psychotherapy, and the doctor told him that the longer he did this, the less chance he had of recovery. The doctor urged him to go to the main hospital, because it was better than ending up in a wheelchair. Evening came and it started to rain, so Kim Dong-hyun went home, and on the way, someone called out to him. The guy who was standing and waiting for him under an umbrella asked him what the doctor had said. He was curious to know if he was feeling better and if the visit to the doctor had helped him. But Kim Dong-hyun replied that this question was none of his business. He reminded Kim Dong-hyun that he was still his friend and asked him not to upset him like that. Then he explained that he had come to check on the condition of the former #1 student at Dong-hyun's school. Then he sarcastically said that if he had managed to recover, then the situation was fixable. But Kim Dong-hyun asked why he had come to see him alone, but he did not understand why he had asked this question. He meant that if he had recovered, it would be impossible to deal with him alone. Then the scoundrel told Kim Dong-hyun that his loyalty had simply made him disabled. But Kim Dong-hyun said that all this happened because he betrayed them and joined Nexus. But he replied that Kim Dong-hyun could continue to be loyal, and he, in turn, would remain who he was now and began to leave. Leaving Kim Dong-hyun, he departed with the words that he intended to see what his loyalty was worth. The next day came, and all our heroes were back at school. A voice came over the loudspeakers, beginning its speech by checking the connection. It was clear to everyone that it was Min Kyung-chol speaking. Meanwhile, a discussion began in the classroom about Park's appearance at their school, promising to destroy everyone involved with Nexus. They understood that Park had come to them to take revenge on everyone for his friend, who had been lucky enough to become disabled after a fight with Hoi. Then they gathered together as a large group and headed off to some special place. At that moment, they believed that the time had come to destroy Park Han-yoon. Park easily defeated them all, and sincerely did not understand what motivated them to make such decisions. After Park defeated everyone who attacked him, he asked the school to find out who the hunter was. But then a new group of people who dreamed of defeating Park Han-yoon approached him. In the end, only one person remained who did not dare to attack Park Han-yoon, who was sitting humbly at his desk. It turned out that Kim Dong-hyun was sitting at that desk and didn't move when he saw what was happening. But because Park was distracted by seeing his friend, the remaining attackers grabbed him. And this was the perfect moment to strike Park Han-yoon. But Park himself was not going to put up with all this, and after getting out, he began to attack those who were attacking him. It didn't take long for Park to defeat all of his attackers, despite the fact that there were a huge number of them. In the end, the school corridor was left full of beaten teenagers. When Park continued down the hallway, he encountered another group that did not seem friendly. They were curious to see if Park Han-yoon was tired from the battle he had to overcome. Rushing towards Park Han-yoon, they noted that they had not even started their battle yet and were not acting at full strength. Kim Dong-hyun, watching all this from the classroom windows, did not understand why Park needed to arrange all this again. Suddenly, someone entered the classroom and said that if Kim Dong-hyun continued to sit there, his friend Park would be beaten with all their might. It was the principal's partner who came to ask him if he was Dong-hyun. When he asked who she was, she said she was Park Han-yoon's partner. He was shocked by this statement, but nevertheless explained to her that from now on he could not fight. But in response, she said that no one was asking him to do so. At the moment, she only asked him to tell her about Park Han-yoon. Kim Dong-hyun said that at the moment, all he knew was that Park intended to kill everyone in the school. But he also added that Park was a very stubborn person. But the girl was cunning and asked him about the reasons for Park Han-yoon's behavior. And when she reminded him that Park intended to prove that they could win, his face immediately changed. Then Kim Dong-hyun remembered Park's words that he promised to win this time. He also remembered Park's statement that it was his loyalty that made him disabled. And when Kim Dong-hyun had almost made his decision, a girl from their team asked him if he was sure of his intentions. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon had already dealt with a corridor full of angry guys who were about to attack. Despite this, there were still those with whom he had not had the chance to fight, and as they descended the stairs, they promised to finish Park off. At that moment, students number 5 and 2 from Dong-hyun's school, named Yo Soo-hoon and Hoi Min-woom, were coming down the stairs with him. There was also student number 4, Kang Tae-hoon, and student number 3, Dae-gil. And there was also student number 2, who was called Gum Bo-suk. Each member of that group was a real monster in human form. But Park Han-yoon was not going to give up and was ready to fight them. And when they pounced on him, Park Han-yoon began to attack them using various objects. Suddenly, someone else appeared in the hallway, whose appearance shocked everyone. It was Kim Dong-hyun, who, turning to Park, noted that he had started all the fun without him. Everyone was shocked by his appearance, but the number 1 student said that it was even better this way, because they would be able to defeat both of them. And so, after a short pause and some conversation, they began their battle. Kim Dong-hyun used a stick broken in half as his weapon. Even though Kim Dong-hyun had very weak and sore legs, it did not prevent him from easily dealing with his attackers. But none of them understood how they managed to fight so well, because Kim Dong-hyun was disabled and Park should have been tired. None of them could understand where these two got so much strength. In the heat of battle, standing back to back with Park, Kim Dong-hyun apologized to him because he felt very guilty towards him. He told Park that he would never have gotten into a fight if he wasn't sure of victory. He explained that despite this, Kim Dong-hyun had become crippled, and Park simply had nothing to say in response. But Kim Dong-hyun also explained that Park was not to blame, as he just wanted to shift the responsibility onto someone else. And when the #1 student attacked again, Kim Dong-hyun asked Park to leave him alone. It wasn't long before they left the #1 student defeated on the floor of the school corridor. Then, Kim Dong-hyun engaged him in battle again, using various objects that came to hand. But suddenly, the #1 student simply picked up Kim Dong-hyun and threw him against the wall. And after Kim Dong-hyun was left without weapons, he was curious to see how he was going to fight. But Kim Dong-hyun tore off his shirt, telling his opponent that he had no intention of fighting him with his bare hands. Seeing that Kim Dong-hyun had wrapped his shirt around his fist, his opponent laughed at this action. But it turned out that Kim Dong-hyun's shirt served as an object to wrap around his opponent's face. Then he knocked him to the floor and began punching him in the face, intending to kill his opponent. But the opponent, the first student, was not so simple, as he used techniques to grab Kim Dong-hyun. He pulled the shirt off his face, telling Kim Dong-hyun that now they were not the same people they used to be. After saying this, he struck Kim Dong-hyun directly on his injured legs, and Kim Dong-hyun fell to the floor in incredible pain. Saying that Kim Dong-hyun would pay for this, he intended to leave the scene. Kim Dong-hyun, however, had no intention of giving up and asked his opponent where he was going, saying that he was not done with him yet. He stood in a fighting stand, showing everyone his intention to continue the fight. Obviously, this decision was a very bad idea for Kim Dong-hyun, as he missed every blow from his opponent. When Kim Dong-hyun found himself on the floor of the corridor again, and his opponent started to leave again, Kim Dong-hyun stopped him again. This time, his opponent did not talk to him for long, and immediately launched an attack on Kim Dong-hyun. But it turned out that this was all part of Kim Dong-hyun's plan to lower his opponent's guard and strike when he least expected it. It turned out that Kim Dong-hyun had shards of broken glass in his hand, which made his blows even more effective in their battle. Kim Dong-hyun grabbed his opponent by the chest and explained that he couldn't lose and simply wasn't going to let that happen. He said that if he lost, he wouldn't be able to look his friend Park Han-yoon in the eye. With that, he used his head to strike his opponent. The first student, taking Kim Dong-hyun's blows to his face, realized that he was exposed. He couldn't do anything because he didn't have enough time to block Kim Dong-hyun's blows. With each blow, Kim Dong-hyun remembered all the injustices that had happened to him, and this made him even more enraged. And when Kim Dong-hyun's opponent was finally defeated, he opened the door and returned to his friend Park Han-yoon. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon had already dealt with the rest of the student gang, and so, supporting each other, they headed for the exit of the corridor where their battle had taken place. Time passed, and completely different people were discussing Park Han-yoon's appearance. They discussed how, in order to take revenge on one person, they had turned the school into a battlefield. Then that person gave his people the order to catch Park Han-yoon without breaking more than 3 of his bones. Suddenly, someone behind him said that they should not rush and let the children figure it out for themselves. He said that children need to deal with their own affairs, while adults deal with theirs. He laid out his suitcases in front of him and asked his opponent not to rush to conclusions. He promised that after hearing his position and proposal, he would not be disappointed at all. His opponent jokingly remarked that this man clearly knew a thing or two about negotiations. It turned out that the suitcases did not contain money at all, but a huge amount of information on various media. The man said that he had tomorrow's headline about a high school fund that sponsors school gangs. There were also schemes for stealing money from this fund, and the man to whom this was said immediately changed his expression. It was explained to him that there was information about illegal land purchases and tax evasion. Then the man asked to be corrected if he had forgotten to mention something. He understood perfectly well that his own life now depended on his decisions. Then he carefully hinted that if their firm took them seriously, they would certainly win. Finally, after a few minutes of silence, he asked his opponent what he wanted and what his goals were in the negotiations. But it turned out that the goal was quite simple: to give him the school. Later, a girl from the Nexus Destruction Company approached Park Han-yoon. She was curious about who Park was, because in her opinion, he was like a robot. She was interested in how he managed to remain intact after this school battle. But he replied that he was not normal, and at that moment, the doctor came out into the corridor. The doctor was surprised that Park managed to remain conscious after receiving such injuries as he had now. Kim Dong-hyun's condition at that moment was far from the best, and he was kept in the hospital for observation. He also explained that Kim Dong-hyun's surgery was successful and that he had a good chance of recovery. Later, Director Kim was in a cafe, looking at something on his phone. He heard words of gratitude for someone taking the time for an interview called Successful Youth. The interviewer thanked the man for his interview, which would help many students. Then Director Kim looked at his phone screen, which displayed the whole truth about high school. When Director Kim was about to leave, the man who was giving the interview said to him that he felt something was wrong. It was Kim Cheon-soo, who was #1 at Nexus, and he noted that it was all the work of President-Director Oh Jun-woo. He said he was very flattered by Director Oh Jun-woo's visit. Then the principal sat down in a chair next to him and asked if Kim Cheon-soo had forgotten who the man sitting in front of him was. He replied that he had not forgotten, but noted that he had changed a lot since their last meeting. But he also said that the past should remain in the past, and that now they were just the president and a player. And then, sipping his coffee, he said that in this way, he was simply showing a little courtesy to a person he respected. The president noted that this was quite offensive because he was the very person who clung to the past. And then he said that it was for this reason that he had absorbed Donghyun High School. But obviously, his interlocutor did not quite understand what the director meant. And, not getting an answer to his questioning look, he extended his hand to the president in farewell, intending to leave. But the director did not show him the same respect and did not shake his hand in return. So Kim Cheon-soo simply bowed. And when he started to leave, the president turned to him and said that next time he would not be able to hide behind his mask. When he left, Director Oh grabbed his head, thinking about their meeting, because it had been 2 years since they last met, and he hoped not to be angry. But he couldn't help being angry, because even Kim Cheon-soo's face annoyed him. When Kim Cheon-soo got into the car, he immediately began discussing on the phone what he should do with Park Han-yoon and Oh Jun-woo. They talked about how if their company had made the first move, he believed they had to make a counter move. He asked the person on the other end of the line to always be on standby, because now the real battle was beginning. He believed that this battle would become one of the most significant stories in Korea. Later, a meeting was organized, to which one person was late. The latecomer was the head of the W Kengi branch, Chae Tae-soo, who was surprised by the sudden meeting. Also present was the head of the Chungcheong branch, Lee Moon-kil, who said he was as surprised by the meeting as Chae Tae-soo. The head of the Gangwon branch, Kim Chi-hyuk, also said that they had not even been given a choice of time for the meeting. The head of the branch in Choya, Cho Jung-gyu, said that he was quite happy to admire Seoul. It turned out that today's meeting was organized because of Park Han-chun, who had been pacified with money last time. But none of them understood why they had all been gathered in Seoul because of one person. It turned out that 2 years ago, there was a guy who they found very annoying, who controlled a small area of Seoul. And when Nexus began to spread beyond the capital with his territory, the problem was still not solved. His resistance gave other people hope, and because of that, Nexus had a lot more work to do. Then, 2 years ago, something happened that they could not even imagine. It so happened that Nexus was on the verge of destruction. And then the man who had recently joined Nexus asked if such a thing was even possible. And then they explained to him that when he was lucky enough to meet Park, he would understand how crazy and powerful he was. The newcomer then said that 2 years had passed since the incident, and now Nexus had become many times stronger, and they could not worry about it. And when the man they had all been waiting for, and who had organized the meeting arrived, he told them that the time had come for a real battle. One of them said that they had better be careful and not rush into battle right away. He explained that, in his opinion, such a reaction was excessive because of the loss of only one school. And then, without much thought, a decision was made to agree with the organizer of the meeting. He said that the old methods would not work now, because Park had a patron, and now they needed to prepare for any turn of events. And then, remembering how they had broken Park the first time, they decided to do it again. Then they jumped on their bikes and set off to carry out their plans. Then, another meeting took place, this time with a larger number of people in the group. And then the leader of this group said that they had finally waited for the day when they could put an end to Park Han-yoon. Many of the group simply could not believe what they were hearing, and when they understood what was going on, their eyes lit up with excitement and a desire to fight. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon and Director Oh arrived at the sealed building. The president addressed Park, saying that he had learned nothing about him during all the time they had known each other. Park had never asked him where the director got so much money, or why he hated Kim Jong-soo. Then, he opened the doors of the sealed building and invited Park to come inside, saying that it was time to explain everything. When they sat down at the dinner table, the president began to explain that the money he was using was not his property. He said that the money he was using belonged to the owner of the house where they were now. And then he began to tell his story which happened 2 years ago. At that time, he had a good friend with whom they spent a lot of time together. He spoke of his friend as someone he couldn't remember when or how he had met. He said that they often fought with each other, but by the next day they had forgotten their differences. For him, he was not just a friend, but practically a brother and family. Then, his friend created artificial intelligence for trading on the stock exchange. It displayed financial statements, trading volumes, behavior patterns, and analyses of various areas, and there were many options for action. His friend was able to code everything and understand trading. The artificial intelligence had promising functionality. Their problems began after Park lost to Nexus. Then, for the members of Nexus, everyone became responsible for what had happened. People began to approach them and demand payment of fines. Those who attracted attention were simply trampled on, and any groups that were formed were destroyed. But even then, O could not tolerate the humiliation from the bullies, and began to defend himself and fight them. His friend had the same attitude and fought alongside him. They weren't very good at fighting, but they thought that people would think they were crazy and leave them alone. But those bullies decided to prove to them that they were even crazier than they were. And when they set his friend's house on fire and he tried to get in, the firefighters wouldn't let them. He knew his friend Hyuk was in the house, and despite his cries, they wouldn't let him in because it was too late. And when his friend died, he went to that gang for an explanation, but he just punched him in the face, saying that he didn't care what happened to his friend. None of them saw a problem with this, and, refusing to admit guilt, said that it was just a coincidence that his friend was unlucky. Then O wanted to deal with them, and flew at them with his fist, but he didn't have enough strength to defeat them, and he felt guilty that he couldn't do anything to save his friend. After that, he was overcome by depression and terrible apathy, combined with indifference to everything that was happening. He couldn't get over it, and he didn't have the strength to fight Nexus. He even had thoughts of taking his own life. Then he sat down at his friend's computer and intended to delete everything and become someone who never existed. Looking at the computer, he saw that trading was taking place based on the data obtained and wanted to donate the proceeds to charity. When he saw the huge numbers in the account balance, he was shocked. He had mixed feelings because he imagined how happy his friend Hyuk would be now. He felt angry that he couldn't share this news with him. And then, only anger gave him the strength to go on living. Then he decided to use this money to crush Kim Jong-soo, even if he had to spend everything he had, because this money wasn't his anyway. Park Han-yoon was curious as to why he had listened to the whole story. The president said it was a kind of manipulation. After their conversation with Park, he called his girlfriend from their group and shared the work he had done. She jokingly asked why he had opened up to Park, noting that he saw a friend in Park. Then she reminded him that Incheon should be next in line. After all, he is the one who strikes first and thinks later, because the only enemy of smart people is someone who doesn't think at all. Without thinking much about it, he agreed with her and said that she was absolutely right on this issue. Suddenly, several motorcycles appeared next to the car in which the president was traveling and surrounded it. As they drove by, the motorcyclists threw several open cans of paint directly into the car. But for the president, it was like some kind of thrill, and he immediately grabbed his seatbelt and began to fasten it. The driver was tense and asked the director to hold on tight. The girl was still on the line and, hearing the terrible sounds, asked the director if he was all right. But the phone was no longer in Oh Jun-woo's hand, and he could hardly hear anything. The car was covered in paint and stopped in the middle of the road, and the girl kept yelling into the phone, demanding an answer. Suddenly, one of the bad guys picked up Oo's phone and answered her yell, asking if she was his lover. He asked her to pass something on to Park Han-yoon, and she listened to him with clenched teeth. He told her to say that they could find the director at the GQ warehouse in eastern Incheon. Then he threw the phone right onto the road, saying that once he passed on this information, Park would definitely understand where he needed to go. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon was walking home in the evening. He thought about what Oh had said, that his anger gave him the strength to live on. But it turned out that Park had no intention of stopping, despite what Director Oh had told him. Suddenly, right in front of Park Han-yoon, there was a girl from their group who had arrived on her motorcycle. Without further explanation, she told him to jump on the back without turning off the motorcycle engine. She shouted to him that the people from Incheon had kidnapped Oh Jun-woo. Meanwhile, Oh Jun-woo woke up and, coming to his senses, did not understand where he was. Looking around, he could see the people from Incheon, whom he had always considered scoundrels. But then the first number, named In-soo, indicated that Oh Jun-woo was now just bait for Park Han-young. Hearing this, Oh Jun-woo laughed loudly, which completely baffled those around him. He laughed because just 2 years ago, the people from Incheon begged Park for forgiveness, and now this was the most foolish decision for them. Oh Jun-woo was sure that even now, their company would not be able to deal with Park Han-yoon. Suddenly, a guy ran up to them and reported that Park Han-yoon had already arrived at the appointed place. Then number 1 turned to Oh and said that the current head of Incheon was different from the previous one, and that today they would prove their worth. When they arrived at the location, she stood behind Park Han-yoon and asked him to deal with these scoundrels. But then the thug who met them said he would take them to the location and ordered them to be quiet. As they walked, the thug said that in Incheon, they fight one-on-one. As they followed the Incheon representative, the girl noticed the guy's height, saying that she had never seen such a tall guy before. She noticed his huge muscles and assumed that he was taking some kind of low-quality chemicals. But in response, he remained silent and did not react to the girl's comments. She definitely didn't like being ignored and asked him to answer her immediately. She began to bombard him with questions about his body and muscles, mentioning his tall stature. But then he turned around and ordered her to follow him, telling her to shut up. In response, she asked him not to be nervous and asked permission for one last small question that was bothering her. Before asking, she reminded him of what happened 2 years ago when they begged Park for mercy and then no one fought with him anymore. Then, pointing her finger at Park, she noted that they still hadn't been able to defeat him, calling them losers. He heard everything she said and turned around, asking her not to provoke him. Then he turned to face her and said that he would gladly teach her a lesson, his voice sounding confident and intimidating. But then Park Han-yoon stepped forward to defend her, and his decisive move interrupted the conversation and created tension. He looked confidently at the bully, who was threatening the girl, and said that there was no doubt that she was right in what she said. Park's words were full of confidence and determination, and she had no choice but to stand behind him and remain silent. Hearing this, the bully felt himself becoming irritated, and anger began to appear on his face, his eyes becoming wild. His anger grew, and he clenched his fists in rage, saying that he could no longer tolerate this, and it was a statement that left no doubt about his intentions. Then he clenched his fist even tighter and aimed it straight at Park, saying that he was going to teach them a lesson himself. When this giant was born, everyone called him a super child. As a teenager, he was 2 meters tall and weighed 243 kilograms. That's why he got the nickname Donkatsu, which means something like pork cutlet. And then, during the fight with Park Han-yoon, something happened to him for the first time. He was thrown into the air. When his comrades saw this, they couldn't believe their eyes, because no one else could do such a thing. Following Donkatsu, our heroes Park Han-yoon and his partner found themselves in the room. Then, everyone began to prepare for the upcoming fight with him, getting ready to attack him as soon as he could get closer. Our heroes were surrounded by a group of numerous criminals who intended to engage Park Han-yoon in battle. The girl jokingly noted that the people from Incheon did not initially intend to fight one-on-one. Behind them all, lying on the floor, was Oh Jun-woo, who shouted to Park Han-yoon so that he could see him. He asked him to release him as soon as possible, saying that his legs had already gone numb in this position. Suddenly, a man appeared who asked the people who were about to attack to disperse and began to approach, taking off his jacket. It was number 1, who intended to defeat Park Han-yoon alone. And when they met face to face, number 1 noted that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Park Han-yoon looked at him and realized that it was his younger brother, Nam Man-soo. Number 1 turned to Park and told him to stop talking and get down to business, because he had been waiting for this day for a long time. When Park didn't respond, Number 1 said that he would strike first and began to attack. When Number 1's hand was heading towards Park Han-yoon, he noticed that he had become very fast and that he would not be able to dodge. That's what happened, and Park Han-yoon took the blow right to his face. After the blow, Number 1 told Park that today he would definitely pay for all the humiliation he had endured 2 years ago. For some reason, Park Han-yoon's speed was not enough to withstand Number 1's blows. Number 1 said that if victory came so easily, he would not be able to quell his anger and asked Park not to disappoint him. The fact is that after losing to Incheon, Number 1's anger did not diminish, so he could not stop training and became stronger. Incheon has always been famous for having some of the best fighters in the country, and when they crawled at his feet, surrendering without a fight, he felt disappointed. This disappointment made him quit boxing because he realized that he needed real fighting skills. Then, with confidence and determination, he came to one place. The leader of that group, sitting at a table with a glass of alcohol, told his subordinate to remove Number 1 from this place. And when he approached him to kick him out, he immediately received a punch right in the chin in response. At that moment, everyone else there took out their weapons and began to attack Number 1. And in those 2 years, he was able to destroy 27 schools, as well as 13 gyms, and 4 criminal gangs. He went through many street fights, all in order to become stronger. And of course, all this was in order to defeat Park Han-yoon in battle. The principal and his assistant watched, and did not understand why Park Han-yoon was weaker than his opponent. The principal didn't understand either, so he suggested that she just watch what was happening. The fact is that before hiring Park, Principal O did some research and discovered one surprising fact. It turns out that Park Han-yoon is the son of the gym director, and he didn't study martial arts, but only improved his physical performance. This guy was gifted from birth with strength, endurance, and adaptability, and that was almost enough to destroy Nexus. Director O understood that if Park adapted to In-soo's movements, he would be able to turn the tide of battle in his favor. But there was a problem. The problem was that Nam In-soo himself understood this as well. The boxer's advantage was that the blows he delivered without gloves were much more effective than if he had fought with them on. Nam In-soo's plan was to deliver as many blows as he could, while he was able to do so, in order to be ready for the second round. Finally, Park Han-yoon pounced on his opponent, preventing him from attacking any further. The number one Nam In-soo did not understand where Park Han-yoon got the strength to push him away. After Nam In-soo managed to push Park away, everyone present could see the rage in Park's eyes. Thanks to Park Han-yoon's rage, he gained the strength and speed to defeat Nam In-soo. And when the next blow landed right on target, Nam In-soo realized that it wasn't just Park's luck, but his incredible strength. It was also important to note that Nam In-soo is one of the fastest fighters in history, but Park Han-yoon is a real monster compared to him. Director O explained to his girlfriend that despite the difference in speed, Park compensates for it with his incredible strength. Director O also explained that Park did not allow himself to be hit and got used to his opponent's movements. During the ongoing battle, Nam In-soo realized that Park Han-yoon was anticipating his attack. He was angry because he had trained for a very long time, but was still unable to defeat Park Han-yoon. Director O watched what was happening and realized that this was definitely the end. Suddenly, someone in the crowd watching the fight shouted at Donkatsu, urging him to help his friend in the fight. Then Nam In-soo realized that his brother Man-soo saw the same thing in the fight with him. And then, looking Park Han-yoon in the eyes, he realized that this was not something a human being could handle. He understood perfectly well his feelings of fear towards him, and as a result, his desire to run away. Suddenly, his comrades from the Incheon gang rushed towards the place where their fight was taking place. And then Donkatsu shouted that he was ready to deal with Park Han-yoon instead of Nam In-soo. Then he shouted to his entire company with an order to stop, and not to do it under any circumstances. And then Nam In-soo fell to his knees, telling Park Han-yoon that he had lost again. The last time a person he respected bowed his head to Park Han-yoon, he felt extremely ashamed of this act. But now that he was in his place, he understood him perfectly. And now he remembered the moment when his brother begged Park Han-yoon on his knees. And he understood that now he had no one to share the burden of loneliness with. He understood that his brother had once carried this burden on his own shoulder, in complete solitude. He understood that his brother's actions 2 years ago were only meant to protect his comrades. But Donkatsu shouted from the crowd, telling Nam In-soo to get up immediately. They shouted at him to continue fighting, because he was the leader of all Incheon. Then Director O joined the conversation and explained that Nam In-soo had done it only to save their lives. He explained, trying to be completely serious, that they really had no chance of winning the fight against Park Han-yoon. He said that the winner was the one who ultimately remained standing on his own 2 feet, and that they had to accept that they had lost. Then he turned to Nam In-soo and asked him to raise his head and look at him. When the boy raised his head and looked at Director O, he spat on his fist, looking Nam In-soo straight in the eyes. After that, he decided to punch him in the head with his fist as well. The director explained that this punch was revenge for kidnapping him. Standing up, he said that he had intended to turn them into the police, but after the punch, he decided that this would be enough and changed his mind about calling the police. Then he said that after all this, they would consider themselves even. Then he asked if Incheon was in debt to Nexus. He noted that everyone in the gang had problems with Nexus and was in deep trouble. The director was aware that in order to borrow money from Nexus, he had become the leader of Incheon. And then the director promised that he would pay off all their debts himself. Nam In-soo did not understand where Oh Jun-woo's generosity towards their gang came from, but Oh himself saw his own benefit in this and told Nam In-soo that he would not do it for nothing. He said that soon they would receive a message from the technical college stating that their tuition had been successfully paid. He asked them to study diligently and, once they finished their studies, to repay him for his investment in them. He said that he knew they had all been trying to work everywhere to pay off their debts. And then he said that, knowing about their efforts, he had decided to help them. Nam In-soo said that he couldn't be in debt to anyone and promised to repay him. Then our heroes left in their cars, and Nam In-soo simply bowed to see them off. Then he turned to the members of his group and told them not to be upset, because it was only his defeat. Then he turned to them and apologized for disappointing them. Then he promised all his comrades that it would never happen again. Then he gritted his teeth and announced to everyone that Incheon was severing all ties with Nexus. He then said that from now on, Incheon would never bow his head. Later, in the office, our heroes discussed how the problem with Incheon had been resolved and how they had done a great job. Suddenly, the girl received a message from the bank about the receipt of funds, with words of gratitude for his rescue. The girl was extremely happy and seemed to dream that the director would be kidnapped every day. Suddenly, she turned to Park and, apologizing for the suddenness of her remark, said that his back was huge. She said that he needed to find suitable clothes and asked if Park was free on the coming weekend. In doing so, she suggested that they spend time together and combine it with shopping. That's how it turned out, and they went shopping together and began to actively try on various outfits on Park Han-yoon. Noticing that he didn't look happy in the suggested outfit, she suggested trying something else. In the next outfit, Park Han-yoon looked like a crazy musician or rocker. Choi So-hyun looked at Park and marveled at the beauty of his body. Suddenly, a man recognized the famous blogger Cho So-hyun and decided to get to know her. The confident man approached Cho So-hyun and spoke to her. He said he was extremely interested in her and knew a place where the two of them could go. Suddenly, she stood up and asked him in a very unflattering tone what he meant. But when he heard her pride, he realized that he had approached her for a reason. Then he took her by the shoulder and again began to persuade her to agree to go with him to a secluded place. But Cho So-hyun didn't think twice and immediately slapped him across the cheek. Then she explained that he shouldn't touch her without permission and that she had heard their conversation about her with his friend. The man didn't like Cho So-hyun's response and lunged at her with his fists. This was not the best decision for him, as Park Han-yoon stepped in to defend his colleague Cho So-hyun. Seeing this, the arrogant man's friend joined in and began attacking Park Han-yoon. In less than a second, Park Han-yoon attacked him too. In the end, when Park Han-yoon grabbed him by his clothes, he apologized to him. Suddenly, the store manager ran up and ordered them to stop fighting. Otherwise, she would have to call the police. Choi So-hyun told the manager that it was just a minor incident, but she turned around and asked what she considered to be a minor incident and demanded compensation for the damage caused. Meanwhile, the action takes place in the Nexus game zone. The head of the game zone, Choi Tae-soo, was interested in whether the people from Incheon had left. Talking on the phone, he said that now they needed to make a move, and they wouldn't have to worry about Park Han-yoon. Then he told the person on the other end of the line that he needed to end the conversation because he had to continue working. Then, sitting in front of him was a man who was busy playing a very exciting game. The head of the gaming zone, Cho Tae-soo, looked at him and suggested that he finally reveal his cards. With a trembling hand, he reached for the coveted card, hoping to win and get the money. Seeing the result, the player was disappointed because he lost again. Choi Tae-soo pointed out that the man opposite him had a debt of over 120 million, and his limit had been exceeded. Saying that the game was interesting, he ordered his subordinates to show the debtor how they collect debts. The girl was frightened and begged them not to do it, saying she was ready to do whatever Cho Tae-soo said. Then he turned to her and, holding out an object, said that it would be impossible to refuse. The card he gave her had a picture of a girl named Cho So-hyun on it. Meanwhile, Dong-hyun was still in the hospital, but had regained consciousness. The staff at the clinic where he was staying scolded him for putting too much strain on his body. Then a man came to the clinic to meet with him and congratulated him on Dong-hyun's successful surgery. It was director Oh Jun-woo, who asked Dong-hyun how quickly he was recovering. Dong-hyun thanked Oh Jun-woo for his financial assistance and promised to repay him, but Oh said that it was all nonsense, and that he had nothing to worry about, and that he didn't even have to fight Nexus if he didn't want to. Then he turned to Oh Jun-woo and asked him to clarify a few things right away, and the director listened carefully to his words. Dong-hyun then said that his business with Nexus would be finished when he destroyed Nexus, and that this was his considered and personal decision. Director Oh looked at him and told Dong-hyun that he was a very reliable guy. Returning to Park Han-yoon's office, the director told him about his meeting with Dong-hyun, and Park was very happy with his friend's decision. Then, Oh Jun-woo said that while Dong-hyun was recovering, they should get back to work. He said that their first target, Incheon, had already been taken care of, and they should move on to their next target. By the second goal, Oh Jun-woo meant the head of the gaming zone named Cho Tae-soo, who had driven Incheon into debt. Then he turned to Park Han-yoon and said that he probably didn't know him. Director Oh told Park about him as the main capital of Nexus, and that all of his income was based on lending and loans. Then he told Park Han-yoon that Cho Tae-soo was now the first person they needed to destroy. But before proceeding with the plan, they decided to meet with someone who could help them. Then they met with a man who demanded protection in return. He then began to tell them that Cho Tae-soo was not a human being, but simply a demon. It turned out that this man, who had been telling the story story before was completely different, and many confused him with a star because he looked good. Of course, it was gratifying for him to hear such statements, because at that time, he had a cherished dream and goal that he was striving for. At that time, he dreamed of becoming an influencer and a favorite of the public who would set trends. But it turned out that in reality, it was extremely difficult to get a huge number of subscribers. No matter how hard he tried, the number of subscribers did not increase, and he began to think about giving up. But suddenly he was invited to join a club that had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and for a moment, he thought it was just a dream. Then he thought that this was the long-awaited golden opportunity that would lead him to increase his number of subscribers, so he seized it and agreed. When they met, the man in the hood told him to turn on the broadcast, and he would show that he had talent. Then, meeting the stars he had been longing for was simply mind-boggling, and the number of subscribers skyrocketed. When the number of subscribers reached 2 million, he thought he was now capable of anything. But his happiness did not last long. Then those who had been helping him showed their true colors. They took him to a place where gambling took place, and the hooded man suggested he try it. When he refused to participate, they told him he was boring, using manipulation. Then he turned to them and ordered them to leave and never return to their club, saying that he had been wrong about them. When they kicked him out, he immediately lost his millions of subscribers and returned to where he started. And then, no matter what content he used on his profile, the number of subscribers no longer increased. And then, out of desperation, he grabbed his head, realizing that he had to get his previous number of subscribers back at any cost. And then he tried to return to the company of those famous guys. And then he agreed to their terms and agreed to participate in gambling. And because he simply wanted the recognition of others, he simply fell into a real hell. And then it wasn't long before he simply became addicted to gambling. And at one point, he lost everything he had. He realized that he had spent all his money, and even the money in his father's account, and he had to get it back at any cost. And then, in a moment of complete despair, he appeared, coming at just the right time. It was Cho Tae-soo, who volunteered to help the man who was already desperate at that point. Concluding his story, he said that Cho Tae-soo then offered to lend him money, and he, of course, agreed. In the end, he said that Cho Tae-soo gave him $5 million a month, and he accumulated debts that he was unable to pay off in 10 years. But what annoyed him most was that it had all been a trap from the very beginning. And then he was overcome with hysteria again at how helpless he now found himself. Then, director Oh Jun-woo said that it was not his fault at all, but the fault of those who decided to play with someone else's dream. The director then turned to him and asked him to be patient a little longer while they and Park Han-yoon took care of everything. After that, he broke into Nexus by kicking open the door to the building. He stormed into the building, demanding to play those gambling games again. It turned out that this was Director Oo's plan, because he asked him and Park Han-yoon to go there and play together. Director Oh then promised him that once they got in, they would destroy Nexus once and for all. And then, when he arrived at the place where the games were held, he put a bag filled with a huge amount of money on the table. Oh Jun-woo's plan was to win all the money available at that gaming club. Moreover, he had a plan on how to pull it off. He explained that in a fair game, the croupier would not be able to win all the time. He understood that they were playing and winning by cheating. Therefore, Oh Jun-woo's plan was to outplay their entire system and, as a result, simply destroy it. That day, the hopeless gambler bet everything according to plan, because there is one unwritten rule in gambling. If someone is caught cheating, they lose everything they have. And at that very moment, Park Han-young joined the game. A group of security guards who worked at the gaming club approached them, and one of them ordered them to leave, while the money would remain with them. But then the responsibility for them fell on Park Han-young's shoulders, as planned by director Oh Jun-woo. Then, they forced the croupier, who was running that very dishonest game, to play. Throwing the ball, Park immediately hit the clearly marked target. When Park raised his hand and saw the ball inside the ordinary game accessory, he realized that he was dealing with another swindler. Director Oh noted that all this was as rude as ever, but as honest as possible. After everything that had happened, Cho So-hyun and Cho Tae-soo met. He apologized for the trouble and suggested discussing the offer he had for her. He then asked her to share Oh Jun-woo's plans with him, and at that moment, he offered to triple the amount that Oh Jun-woo had promised her for the information she would provide him. Hearing the offer of triple the monetary reward, she agreed with burning eyes. She said that she would give him her account number right away, and then immediately tell him about Oh Jun-woo's plans. Choi Tae-soo was extremely surprised at Choi So-hyun's quick decision on this matter. Then, he reminded her of the consequences that could arise if she suddenly decided to give them false information. She took her phone, and after confirming that the money had been transferred to her account, said that she had no reason to lie to them. She stared at her phone and began to talk about looking for information about Oh Jun-woo's next move, and said that they might not even have to wait. She continued to stare at her phone screen and counted aloud to 10 in reverse order, misleading everyone who was there. Choi Tae-soo sat there, looking as if he had no idea what the countdown meant. When she reached 1, she said that Park Han-yoon was going to destroy the Nexus game zone. And that's exactly what happened, because at that very moment, one of the guards knocked down the door that Park Han-yoon had come through. And before long, Park Han-yoon himself was inside the game room. Behind him was the offended man, who sarcastically suggested they play again. They had no choice but to try to stop Park Han-yoon on their own by attacking him. But obviously, this turned out to be their deepest mistake, which cost them their strength and health. Choi Tae-soo himself did not understand what he should do in this situation. Then he realized that he could not be stopped at all, and felt a terrible fear in that moment. Then his left and right hands, Charlie and Rodriguez, decided to try to save the situation and protect their master. Choi Tae-soo himself decided to run away while he had the chance. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon was able to deal with the two thugs, who only looked strong but didn't have enough strength to win. As he ran away, Choi Tae-soo realized that thanks to his money, he would be able to find a way to defeat Park Han-yoon. When director Oh Jun-woo realized that Choi Tae-soo had escaped, he said that it wouldn't take long to find him. Then Choi Tae-soo went to his friend, who worked on something, and said that now, all he had to do was give the order, and Park would be finished. And right then, the order was given, and the button on the specialist's keyboard was pressed. Then they launched an advertisement on the World Wide Web. The fact is that the Kengi Gaming Zone is quite popular, and everyone knew about it. But it is not as popular as the illegal gambling site, which was the main source of income. After all, the total number of active Nexus users is about 80,000. And then Park Han-yoon was thrown in as bait. Everyone understood that such a high reward meant only one thing. Park Han-yoon was a real monster. In that case, he decided to offer not just a one-time reward for Park, but a whole list of payment systems as an incentive. And so, anyone who needed money could damage Park for a separate fee. When the hunt began, everyone actively tried to attack Park Han-yoon in every way possible. When Park grabbed her hand and looked at her, he realized that she was not from Nexus. Suddenly, someone behind him also tried to hit him on the head with a bat. Park Han-yoon was able to dodge this blow as well, but he had no idea what was going on. After dealing with the attacker, he stared intently at the girl, forcing her to explain what was going on. Then she showed him the advertisement about him on her smartphone. Park Han-yoon understood perfectly well that all this was done by Choi Tae-soo. Suddenly, another company hungry for money shouted that it had found its target. There were a terrifying number of people who wanted to harm Park Han-yoon, and they were all rushing towards him. Choi Tae-soo turned to the person who had made all this happen and asked if he knew why he had chosen gambling. He explained that it was the easiest way to turn poor people into obedient dogs. He also spoke about beggars, for whom even their own lives are not worth a penny, and who are willing to take a person's life for money. His plan was to make people lose control of themselves and turn them into obedient dogs. But Park Han-yoon was not going to play along with them and pushed them aside one by one. Among the attackers, he even saw children who looked at him with kind hearts, but held weapons in their hands that could kill a person. At that moment, director Oh Jun-woo called Park and asked if he was okay. He said that Park needed to wait a little longer, because Oh Jun-woo's people would be there soon. Park said he didn't need help, but asked Oh to find Choi Tae-soo as soon as possible. Then, the head of Director Oo's security came to him, waiting for further instructions. Director Oh Jun-woo was furious, and ordered the head of security to prepare his men immediately. As Park Han-yoon continued to fight them off, some asked him for permission to kick him in order to get money for the treatment of their loved ones. When Park Han-yoon disappeared, he found himself inside a building, and it seemed that this was also someone's plan. An ambush awaited him there, offering him a little game. And then Park realized that ordinary people had been used only to lure him to this place. Park understood that he was facing Nexus people, and therefore noted that he was very happy to meet them. It didn't take long before Park Han-young began to scatter all the people attacking him in different directions. The others, watching Park Han-yoon fight, were shocked and did not understand if he was even human. Suddenly, director Oh Jun-woo called and told Park that he had managed to find the place where Choi Tae-soo was hiding. Park replied in a completely calm voice that he had received the information and was about to leave. And when Park headed straight for those scoundrels in order to finish them off quickly, they felt a strong sense of fear. They began to push each other in order to hide more quickly, and were afraid that Park would get to them. But Park did not touch them, and simply walked past, telling the director on the phone that he would arrive shortly. Choi Tae-soo and his friend were watching what was happening on the surveillance camera when Park looked there. He turned to Choi Tae-soo and asked if he had managed to see Park's face. Choi Tae-soo replied that he had managed to see it, and noted that Park did not look very pleasant. When Park started to move on, he was met by another group of people who wanted to fight him. They watched what was happening on the surveillance cameras, and thought that Park would surely meet his end now. Then the programmer suggested dealing with director Oh Jun-woo right away. Choi Tae-soo realized that this was an excellent idea, and raised his friend's salary by 500 won for it. And so he was about to press that coveted button that would launch an advertisement about Director Oh on the network. And then the face of Director Oh Jun-woo appeared on all the screens. Choi Tae-soo was surprised at how quickly his friend had managed to do what he wanted, but the programmer told him that he had nothing to do with it and that he hadn't done anything yet. And then laughter, belonging to Oh Jun-woo, followed from the surveillance screens. They couldn't turn him off the screens because the computer had been hacked and there was no way to access the server now. Oh said from the screen that it was all useless because the security was weak and they were able to hack everything at once. Then Oh Jun-woo said that he planned to do to them what they had done to others. Then a photo appeared on the screen and Cho Tae-soo was extremely surprised because it was his own website. Then Director Oh turned to him and said that he was very interested to see how Cho Tae-soo would deal with this. When the Nexus people saw this, they immediately realized that their organization would soon come to an end. Cho Tae-soo had no choice but to shout to his fellow programmer to gather all the money, and then they intended to run away. As they fled, the door to the room was broken down, and angry people burst in, wanting to kill them. As he ran away, he realized that now he needed to create a new website and find new slaves. But they didn't get far, because Park Han-yoon met them on the stairs of the back exit. Choi Tae-soo discovered that his heart was beating so hard with fear that its thumping could be heard clearly. And despite all the threats that Choi Tae-soo made towards Park Han-yoon, he still struck him as if he had not heard his threats. Park Han-yoon stopped Cho Tae-soo from escaping every time he tried. When Cho Tae-soo realized that his persuasion wasn't working, he decided to offer Park twice as much as Director Oh was paying him. Obviously, this plan didn't work either, because Park didn't listen to him and continued to hit him. With tears in his eyes, he begged Park Han-yoon to spare him because his blows were unbearable. Then Park Han-yoon said that he would gladly step aside and let other people take his place. And when Park stepped aside, a crowd of other people pounced on him. Soon, those bloodthirsty people got what they wanted, and the advertisement with his face on the website was completed. The head of security reported to Director Oh that Cho Tae-soo would be recovering in the hospital for about 14 weeks. He said that all websites had been blocked, and that after his discharge from the hospital, they would begin proceedings. Suddenly, Jung-soo came to the hospital and brought oranges to the sick Cho Tae-soo. Jung-soo didn't beat around the bush and immediately asked him how things were going with his money. Choi Tae-soo even got up from his bed and apologized, saying that he was indeed to blame. Then Jung-soo grabbed Choi Tae-soo's arm so hard that it hurt him a lot. Choi Tae-soo screamed in pain because his whole body hurt after the fight with Park Han-yoon. Jung-soo then said that he had nothing to apologize for if he wasn't going to give up. Jung-soo looked at him and said that he had to return every penny to him. Meanwhile, Dong-hyun had recovered, and it was time for him to be discharged from the rehabilitation clinic. The nurse who had been caring for Dong-hyun all this time wished him luck and asked him not to get involved in fights anymore. Then he turned and said that such advice should be addressed to someone else. Leaving the clinic, he found a group of people extorting money from someone again. They extorted money from him, and when they realized he didn't have any, they decided to knock out a couple of his teeth with a hammer. Dong-hyun saw a ring belonging to the Nexus people on one of the thugs. Then they held his head in such a way as to remove the teeth from his mouth and asked him to raise his hand if it hurt. One of the thugs who was doing all this asked him not to move, otherwise he could damage his palate with the tool. Suddenly, he looked away and seeing Dong-hyun, asked who he was. At that moment, Dong-hyun was stretching and doing exercise, probably to get their attention. He didn't stop exercise, and those people even thought for a moment that the man in front of them had definitely gone mad. And when they started to approach him, he immediately kicked him right in the face with his feet. Seeing this, the other members of Nexus also rushed at him with an attack. At this point, Dong-hyun's endurance and flexibility are at 80%. When he dealt with everyone, he realized that he was still very far from his previous form, when he could lift 240 kilograms. As he left, he realized that he needed to train even harder and more diligently. One of the defeated men realized that he did not immediately recognize Kim Dong-hyun, because he had cut his hair and changed his hairstyle. Then, he also realized that the rumors about the return of the legendary Park Han-yoon and Kim Dong-hyun were completely true. They were so famous that they were considered the strongest fighters of an entire era. They were able to attract the attention of many outsiders and rewrote history by challenging Nexus several years ago. And when Incheon and the Game Zone were defeated, everyone understood that the legends were returning. Some felt fear and anger upon learning this, but there were also those who held a different opinion on the matter. For such people, the return of Park Han-yoon and Kim Dong-hyun became a kind of hope. Later, Jung-soo met someone who said that we had another chance to face the legend. This person then said that Jung-soo only comes to him when it concerns Park Han-yoon. Jung-soo then went to a man named Baek Moon-yeon, who was extremely serious at that moment. Jung-soo then told Baek Moon-yeon that they needed someone who could handle Park Han-yoon. Reminding Jung-soo of what happened 2 years ago, he said that he was not going to be his lapdog. Jung-soo then said that 2 years ago, he had no choice, and promised that this time everything would be completely different. Asking for this, Jung-soo told his interlocutor that by doing this, he could get anything he wanted. He then asked if his wish could be to get the entire nexus. But in response, Jung-soo suggested that Park Moon-yeon think carefully before saying anything. Park Moon-yeon then told him to relax, as he was just trying to joke around. Accepting Jung-soo's order, he said that after completing it, he would be waiting for a drink from him. Left alone with his thoughts, Park Moon-yeon realized that Jung-soo had another plan for him. He then understood that Jung-soo was planning to get rid of both of them at once. When he discussed all this with his comrades, they realized that they had a bad feeling about this matter. It was a man named Cho Ju-young, who was Park Moon-yeong's right-hand man. Park Moon-yeong's right-hand man, Lee Jong-yong, said that he could take anyone's life at his command. Getting up from the bench, he said that he would be interested in meeting his old acquaintances. And then he told his comrades that Park Han-yoon was not someone who could be taken down by a large number of attackers. And then he said that in this case, in the fight against Park Han-yoon, it would be better for them all to approach from a distance. Then he decided to deal with Jung-soo right after he finished with Park Han-yoon. Meanwhile, after Kim Dong-hyun returned, Cho So-hyun recorded a video for the internet congratulating him on his recovery. Director Oh Jun-woo said that recording a video for the internet would definitely be unnecessary here, because they had a new task to complete. But she started yelling at him, demanding a celebration and at least 1 day off. Oh Jun-woo pointed out that revenge was the best form of relaxation for him. Suddenly, Kim Dong-hyun turned to his friend Park Han-yoon. He glanced at the director and Cho So-hyun and asked Park if they could trust them with 100% certainty. Park Han-yoon replied, reminding him that they had a common enemy. Suddenly, someone called director Oh Jun-woo while he was saying that it didn't matter how much money they had. When he picked up the phone, he was immediately informed that Incheon had been attacked. After the incident, some people in Incheon ended up in the hospital in serious condition. Upon learning this, our heroes immediately went to the hospital and asked what had happened. But the head of Incheon replied that there was nothing to see here and promised to sort everything out himself. Donkatsu, who was lying in a hospital bed, turned to Park Han-yoon and asked him to help them. Director Oh Jun-woo realized that Donkatsu had been conscious all this time and asked him what had happened. He asked director Oh Jun-woo to make sure that Hyun did not fight with the people who had arranged this. Director Oh immediately understood that he was talking about the people who were members of Nexus, but he was interested in who specifically it was. And then he said that the attacker was a man named Baek Moon-yeon. The fact is that Park Moon-yeon's handwriting was immediately recognizable. Then Kim Dong-hyun said that Park Moon-yeon was the one who had injured his legs back then. Later, there was another important meeting for Jung-soo, where he thanked the director for his hard work, and the director said that everything had gone well. Jung-soo then suggested that now was the most convenient time to start implementing their plan. He said that next month, school children across the country would start playing the game, and then continued with the topic of their projects. He said that if their projects took the lead, the shares would rise from 15,000 won to 80,000 won. But the man opposite him was not sure that this was even possible, and looked at his opponent with distrust. But Jung-soo told him that sometimes you just have to believe, and everything will fall into place. Then, as he rode down in the elevator with another man, they talked about the game, which had orders placed all over the country, and that there would be no problems. Jung-soo told him that this was his area of responsibility, and therefore he did not plan to get involved. Then this man suggested that Jung-soo had decided to push Park Han-yoon into the hands of Baek Moon-yeon. And that unknown man, addressing Jung-soo, noted that using Baek Moon-yeon would leave a lot of dirty traces. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hyun continued his strength training in the gym. Choi So-hyun also kept him company and trained while posting on social media. Suddenly, she suggested to Kim Dong-hyun that next time they shoot a joint video from the gym for social media. She said she needed his help in getting information about Baek Moon-yeon. While continuing to exercise, he began to talk about Baek Moon-yeon's genius. He said that among all the guys he had met, there were only 3 who were geniuses in combat. 2 of them were guys named Park Han-yoon and Kim Jong-soo. The third, but no less brilliant fighter, was Park Moon-yeon. He began telling a story that happened 2 years ago in a diner that he and Park liked, where they made sure no one would disturb them. When they were in class, a classmate told Dong-hyun about a transfer student from America who had defeated the students of Kangmun. Kim Dong-hyun found this very strange and thought about it. Then it happened that Baek Moon-yeon invaded his and Park Han-yoon's territory. And from that moment on, everything began to change dramatically. He was then able to subjugate all the schools in the surrounding area. In addition, he pitted them against each other in order to destroy the weakest among them. There was absolutely no reason for such actions, because he was simply that kind of person. Rumors about Baek Moon-yeon spread very quickly, and judging by the route, this school was supposed to be next. But no one at the school was worried about it because Kim Dong-hyun was there. And when Kim Dong-hyun was looking at his phone in class, someone walked in. When Kim Dong-hyun saw the person who had entered, he was simply shocked and asked what had happened to his face. Then the guy walked into the classroom and, addressing Kim Dong-hyun, warned him not to underestimate Park Moon-yeon. And when he fell to the floor, there was a note on his jacket with the place and time of the meeting with Kim Dong-hyun. That same evening, they arrived at the park at the appointed time. They waited for almost an hour and decided to start going home because it seemed to them that no one else was coming. Suddenly, right in front of them, another person fell down, and on his shirt was written that Park Moon-yeon does not forgive mistakes. He destroyed the school where Kim Dong-hyun studied from the shadows, and no one could catch him, and he drove him crazy, little by little. At that time, Kim Dong-hyun was enraged beyond belief and to the limit. But after some scoundrel found Kim Dong-hyun himself, it was on that ill-fated day that their crazy acquaintance took place. That evening, Baek Moon-yeon told Kim Dong-hyun that he was no longer the strongest in school, but rather an ordinary servant. Kim Dong-hyun could not tolerate the insult and began their fight without further discussion or explanation. Kim Dong-hyun was extremely annoyed and demanded an answer as to why he had been hiding from him all this time. Their fight went on for a long time, and his opponent was really strong. Park Moon-yeon then replied that his concealment was a message to make their battle more interesting by provoking Kim Dong-hyun's anger. Kim Dong-hyun was then extremely confident in his abilities and wanted to end their duel quickly with his final blow. But his confidence and strength were not enough to withstand Park Moon-yeon. Kim Dong-hyun then told Cho Song-hyun that if Park Han-yoon was a beast, then Park Moon-yeon was like a real cobra. He possessed a venom that blinded him with anger during battle. Kim Dong-hyun then explained that by giving in to his anger and resentment, he had lost his advantage. Kim Dong-hyun realized that he could not lose focus under any circumstances. Kim already understood that he had underestimated his opponent, but his opponent gave him time during the fight to realize this. In the end, both of them were knocked out by the blows they had inflicted on each other. As a result of all this, someone managed to report the incident to the police. And since they all had to leave the place where the police were already rushing, Baek Moon-yeon decided to stop their fight for the time being. As he left, he said that next time he would come back and be much angrier than he was during their fight. And so, their fight ended in a draw, with no winner. Later, when they were walking together with Park Han-yoon, Park told his friend that he had heard certain rumors. Then his friend Park Han-yoon offered his help to deal with this problem. Kim Dong-hyun then replied to Park that he would have to intervene anyway, because Park Moon-yeon was planning to take over the entire district. Then he turned to his friend and asked him to avoid fighting with him, because he intended to deal with this scoundrel himself. After that, the other side discussed that they were wrong in thinking that Kim Dong-hyun was weaker than Park Han-yoon, and that they also had problems with him. Then he ordered his assistant to go through the captured schools and gather a group of the 100 best and strongest fighters. At that time, he assumed that even the two wildest beasts would not be able to cope with such a situation. Meanwhile, Jong-soo and Lee Moon-gil were having lunch together in Busan. Lee Moon-gil began discussing rumors that Baek Moon-yeon was determined to target Park Han-yoon. He wolfed down his food and said that he feared they might lose Busan as well. He also noted that he had heard that Park Han-yoon and Baek Moon-yeon were roughly equal in strength. He then suggested that they could get rid of both of them at once. But Jong-soo did not respond to the suggestion, and getting up from the table, told Lee Moon-gil to get up and come with him. There were a huge number of men standing outside the panoramic windows, and Jong-soo said that they needed to deal with them first. Suddenly, the people outside began to destroy everything in their path in order to get inside. Lee Moon-gil immediately called his entire company and ordered them to respond to the invasion and finish off the attackers without wasting much time. Then a real battle began between them, with one group attacking the other. At that moment, Jong-soo himself joined the battle without wasting any time. Meanwhile, Baek Moon-yeon arrived with his entourage, consisting of his right and left hands as deputies. He then addressed the 100 fighters he had found, explaining that they had gathered to deal with Park Han-yoon. He explained that he understood their fears and concerns perfectly well, but nevertheless said that they could not continue to live in fear. He then said that if they were no longer willing to endure humiliation from Park Han-yoon, he invited them to join him. He promised them that if they were successful, they would be able to live their lives as they wished. Regarding Nexus, he also explained to them that he intended to climb to the very top of this pyramid, so they had nothing to fear. And then, after Park Han-yoon's impassioned speech, they were all ready to radically change history and the future. At that moment, Park Han-yoon himself appeared in the building, dragging someone by their clothes with complete confidence and calmness. He then said that the hundreds of people they had found would not be enough to defeat him. He took off his jacket, threw it aside, and walked confidently straight into the crowd toward the upcoming battle. He walked through the crowd of hundreds of people and approached Park Moon-yeon, deciding to meet him in person. Park Moon-yeon introduced himself and thanked Park Han-yoon for coming in person and saving him time. But Park interrupted his polite remarks and told him to attack so that he could see what he was made of. Park Moon-yeon said that it would be too boring, even though the battle itself was a great honor for him. Several people behind him hit Park with jackets filled with broken glass shards. Park Han-yoon looked at his hands and saw blood coming out of them and said so out loud. And then, for Park, it was like a green light to start their crazy fight. Park Han-yoon knew perfectly well that even with the broken glass, his opponents were very weak. And then Park Han-yoon realized that Park Moon-yeon was simply using these people to wear him down. Park Han-yoon decided to wrap his hands with his torn t-shirt, and a frenzied rage began to form in his eyes. This battle was too exhausting for Park, but it was this situation that helped create the well-known legend. Park Moon-yeon thought it was impossible because he had fought many strong guys in America. Even when his opponents were in a different weight class, he never lost. Even the guy who was considered the strongest in the country at the time was no match for him. But Park Han-yoon made a completely different impression on him. He couldn't understand how Park Han-young could be so strong, and it was inexplicable to him. And when Park Han-young defeated Park Moon-yeon, he strictly forbade him from sticking his neck out in the future, pinning his head to the floor with his foot. He said that if he disobeyed his order, he would always be looking at the ground. After what happened, he sat with his head down, not understanding what was wrong with Park Han-young. He couldn't understand how an ordinary person could stand up to 100 of the strongest fighters alone. Then he realized that Park Han-young had probably become an insurmountable wall for him. And then, after the fight with Park Han-yoon, he disappeared for a while, but that didn't mean he had given up for good. At that time, news of the battle quickly spread online and became one of the most popular stories. Chong-su then realized that Nexus was now in a difficult position, and for this very reason, they tried to take territory by force. But then Park Han-young exceeded all expectations and destroyed everyone who stood in his way. First was the territory of Incheon, then Gyeonggi, and then Gangwon, and Park managed to drive all the anger out of them. Chong-su then realized that in order to instill fear in people again, they needed to defeat Park Han-yoon in a fair fight. It was then that Chong-su decided to deal with this problem himself. Then, a man named Leon Kim came to him and said that putting the entire Nexus on the line would be a very risky decision. He explained that it was not worth the risk for the sake of gaining just one district. They then discussed the possibility of recruiting someone who was not a member of Nexus. Chong-su then came up with a new plan and went to talk to the previously defeated Park Moon-yeon. Chong-su then offered him a plan on how to deal with Park Han-yoon, and in return, he would be able to take these territories for himself. And then, to start with, he suggested seeing what Kim Jong-soo from Nexus was like. And when Park Moon-yeon started attacking, Jong-soo easily stopped his fist with his hand. Jong-soo then said that he had an excellent plan to defeat Park Han-yoon. He said that he was the best candidate for the job. Park Moon-yeon replayed the events of the past in his head and felt humiliated again. So he asked Jong-soo to tell him about his plan. At that time, Kim Dong-hyun was returning home alone and was surrounded by a huge crowd of people. At that moment, Kim Dong-hyun thought that Nexus would still play by the rules of bare-handed combat. He couldn't even imagine that they would use dirty tricks and weapons in battle, and he underestimated them. When Kim Dong-hyun saw the attacker's hairstyle, he immediately recognized him. Then Park Moon-yeon sent a photo of his friend Dong-hyun and wrote the address and a message to hurry up in the message. When Park Han-yoon received the message, he was extremely shocked by what he saw. And that's how the final battle of that war began. When Park Han-yoon arrived at the appointed address and saw Park Moon-yeon, he reminded him that he had ordered him not to stick his neck out. But then he picked up an object and said he would never back down. And when he began to desperately beat his friend, Park Han-yoon immediately rushed to his aid. But it turned out to be a trap, and Park Han-yoon did not notice the chain he had fallen into. Everyone began pulling on different ends of the chain in order to grab and immobilize Park Han-yoon. But Park Han-yoon simply took all the chains and tore them apart, hurling them at their owners. In the end, he was unable to completely free himself from the chain, and those scoundrels pinned him right in the center of the room. But Park Moon-yeon just shouted joyfully that the main thing in all this was not friendship and honesty, but victory and nothing else. Then he felt excessive excitement and asked Park Han-yoon to show him what he was capable of in order to save his friend. Then he ordered all his men to attack Park Han-yoon. But despite the chains, all the attackers flew apart, one after another. Seeing what Park was doing, they thought he was capable of breaking all these binding chains, and considered him simply a monster. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't long before the chains broke one after another. Then, the next part of the plan came into play, and they decided to set fire to everything around them. But then Park Moon-yeon approached and hit Park on the head, causing him to bleed. Seeing that Park Han-yoon had fallen to his knees from the blow, Park Moon-yeon thought that it was all over. Then he stepped on his head, shouting enthusiastically that he had defeated Park. When the building was already actively burning, they all shouted at Park Moon-yeon that he needed to leave as soon as possible. They dragged Park Moon-yeon away by force, as he couldn't bring himself to finish off Park Han-yoon. Park Han-yoon remained lying on the ground, and Kim Dong-hyun realized that it was all his fault. He understood that Park wouldn't have had to deal with these people if it weren't for him, and now the consequences of that battle still haunt them both. That day, Park approached Dong-hyun and apologized for being a little late. When they left the burning building, they were met by the police. A couple of days later, the police came back, and they realized that everything had been planned from the beginning. It was all set up to look like Park Han-yoon had arranged it all to take revenge on students from another school. All the witnesses who were there at the time testified against them, so the police were not on their side. The biggest problem was that the burned-down building belonged to Kim Jong-soo's family. At first, they demanded compensation, and then they demanded it from the parents. In the end, the injured party decided not to pursue the matter further. Chong-soo then said that a public apology from the perpetrators would be enough for him. Park came out of the shower and heard his father actively calling various companies trying to borrow money. Then Park Han-yoon went out into the street and started punching the walls in anger. And that's when their battle ended in complete defeat and humiliation. Then Jong-soo asked him in front of everyone if he felt guilty. He told him that Park was a nobody from the very beginning and suggested that he stay where he was and not raise his head again. With that, Kim Dong-hyun's story was complete, and he bowed his head and said that was all he knew about Baek Moon-yeon. He said that this was the reason for his initial refusal, that he would only get in the way again. She approached him and said that he shouldn't worry so much now, because everything was completely different now. She said that each of them had a different life before they all met. The director, sitting in his office, tried to think about what the main pillars of Nexus were. He thought that surely the main forces were not involved. Then, director Oh Jun-woo realized that they were just trying to buy time. When Park was returning home, his phone rang in his pants pocket. When he was distracted by the phone, a car sped by at high speed and knocked him down. When the car stopped, something was thrown from the window right at his feet, which Park Han-yoon couldn't help but notice. On the ground lay a photograph of his friend Dong-hyun and Chae So-hyun. Meanwhile, Jong-soo asked Moon-kil to help Park Han-yoon. Jong-soo told him that he wouldn't have to fight himself, but only asked him to hand over a certain number of people. He asked him to hand over the people who obeyed Nexus, as well as those who obeyed him. Moon-kil Jae replied to Jong-soo that he couldn't allow those people to become bargaining chips. Then he said that he intended to deal with Park Han-yoon himself. In response, Jong-soo said that it was not that he did not trust him, as it might seem at that moment. He told Moon-il that they had important matters to attend to, and that now was not the time for that. By this, he meant that now was not the time to get personally involved. He explained that such actions could seriously disrupt all their plans. He then suggested leaving all the cleanup work to Park Moon-yeon. Muriel just continued to listen silently to Jong-soo's words about how they now had more important things to do than this. Meanwhile, an unknown man was walking down the hallway of the boys' locker room. At that moment, Kim Dong-hyun was in the shower, unaware of anything like this. The unknown man approached the locked door very quietly, as if on tiptoes, and tried to pick the lock with careful movements. It didn't take long for the man to open the lock on Kim Dong-hyun's locker. With a deft movement of his hands, he used an adapter to get the information he needed. Then he hacked into his smartphone and turned on continuous geolocation transmission from his mobile device. Time passed, and Kim Dong-hyun took a shower, got dressed, and left the school grounds. Suddenly, as he stepped onto the road, a motorcycle sped past, nearly knocking him off his feet. Kim Dong-hyun immediately realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for. Immediately after that, he looked up and saw an air conditioner falling on him from above, but Kim Dong-hyun was agile enough to dodge the falling object. After that, the leaders of the two groups met each other, and they were Lee Moon-kil and Baek Moon-yeon. Lee Moon-kil extended his hand to Baek Moon-yeon to greet him with respect, but Baek Moon-yeon did not respond in kind and simply walked past him, refusing to shake his hand. Baek Moon-yeon addressed everyone, saying that this time everything would be completely different. Then he turned around and replied that Park Han-yoon would be here soon. Then he sarcastically told Lee Moon-kil to sit down and humbly wait for the upcoming show. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hyun was persistently trying to call someone. At that time, Park Han-yoon was looking at a photo of Cho and his friend Kim Dong-hyun. Then a message came to his phone from Kim Dong-hyun's hacked phone, saying that he was in trouble again and needed help. Attached to the message was the geolocation of where Kim Dong-hyun was supposedly now. When Park Han-yoon read the threat that his friend would never walk again, he immediately rushed in that direction. Then Kim Dong-hyun received a similar message on his phone. Only this time, it was from Park Han-yoon, and he immediately realized that they had both been tricked. The problem was that Park Han-yoon wasn't answering his phone, and it was very bad timing. Kim Dong-hyun understood that if he didn't do anything, history could repeat itself. One of Baek Moon-yeon's assistants suggested that he pay attention to the main gate of the building where they were now. Park Han-yoon was there, and Baek Moon-yeon shouted at him from above to come up to them as soon as possible. He shouted at him to hurry up, scaring him that his friend could simply lose his legs. When he went upstairs, he was the first to volunteer for the fight. And then, of course, it didn't take long, and you could even say that in that very second, he was hit in the jaw. And then, sending this man ahead of him, he rushed onward to save his friend. And when the others pounced on him, he was able to defeat them all in a second and moved on. Lee Moon-kil noted that everyone who encountered Park Han-yoon downstairs were mere novices who had never participated in such battles. He said that they had no chance against the monster that was Park Han-yoon. Then, in the corridor, he encountered two more fighters who were probably intent on blocking his way upstairs. When he encountered the Nexus Elite and began to exchange blows with them, they easily dodged his attacks. Then one of them grabbed Park by the arm and began to throw him to the floor using martial arts techniques. Then, as if they had won the victory over him, they told Park Han-yoon that he should not interfere in the affairs of the Nexus. But the words of these guys from the Nexus Elite did not convince Park Han-yoon, and he rushed at them again with an attack. But those guys were not weak either, and they surrounded Park Han-yoon from all sides. No matter how hard Park Han-yoon tried to break free, he still couldn't. But Park Han-yoon found the perfect solution to this problem by simply slamming his opponent against the wall with himself. But they did not loosen their grip because they understood that Park Han-yoon was already very weak. Park Han-young pushed off and flipped himself upside down in order to damage his opponent. Suddenly, one of the opponents holding him gave up and loosened his grip due to the injuries he had sustained. Now all he had to do was defeat the second opponent, whom he had already taken into his hands. Lee Moon-kil, addressing the rest of his men, said that they would probably not be able to defeat Park Han-young. Then Lee Moon-kil turned to his comrades and said that they did not need to defeat Park Han-young, but simply needed to weaken him. They needed to focus on making Park Han-yoon lose all his stamina after fighting them. Park Han-yoon's next opponent was another strong guy from the Nexus gang. Next, they sent the guy who was considered the fastest in their gang into battle. Meanwhile, Cho So-hyun and Kim Dong-hyun were heading somewhere that would take about an hour to reach. They arrived in Incheon, and the leader of the group said that they had managed to find those who were able to hack their mobile devices. Then their whole company jumped on their motorcycles and headed to the next meeting place. Kim Dong-hyun was lost in thought and mentally asked Park Han-yoon to be patient a little longer. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon attacked him, but none of his blows were successful because his opponent was truly strong. Although this fast man was asked not to attack, he decided to try it anyway. But that man was too confident and didn't notice how he ended up against the wall, which was very bad for him. He was surprised that Park Han-yoon was still able to stand after his two blows and continue to attack. At one point, his arm was grabbed, which was clearly not a good thing. Meanwhile, everyone began to panic when the entrance to the second floor was broken through. Lee Moon-kil realized that Park was heading towards them too quickly and understood that those guys had not listened to him and had done everything wrong. Lee Moon-kil could only hope that Park was now tired and that the third and fourth floors would be a problem for him. Suddenly, a frightened man ran up and reported that Park Han-yoon had also overcome the third floor. Lee Moon-kil now realized that the previous floors had not been able to exhaust Park Han-yoon. It wasn't long before they lost the fourth floor as well. Despite Park Han-yoon overcoming all the floors, Baek Moon-yeon was still in good spirits. Lee Moon-kil turned to Baek Moon-yeon and tried to explain to him the situation they were in. Then Baek Moon-yeon looked Lee Moon-kil straight in the eye and said that his overconfident plan had been doomed from the start. Then Park Moon-yeon told him to step aside and said that now it was his turn to fight. It wasn't long before they were informed that Park Han-yoon had already reached the top floor and had arrived at the location. And now Park had entered the place where Park Moon-yeon was calmly waiting for him. Park Han-yoon immediately began by asking about the whereabouts of his friend Kim Dong-hyun, but Park Moon-yeon said that Park Han-yoon was stupid if he didn't understand from the very beginning that he wasn't there. He began to laugh loudly, saying that Park Han-yoon had walked into his trap on his own. He immediately threw a net over him, which Park Han-yoon definitely did not expect. Then he ordered all his comrades to attack him, and they immediately began to carry out the order. It wasn't long before Park Han-yoon's comrades came to his aid, and it was more timely than ever. Without even getting off his motorcycle, Kim Dong-hyun joined the battle. The leader of the Incheon group turned to Kim Dong-hyun and said that they could handle it without him and that he should go help his friend. He did just that, and in a rage, he went to Park Han-yoon. Everyone immediately realized that the traitors from Incheon were here. Then a real battle began between them, and they all fought with all their might. Lee Moon-kil did not expect their meeting with Nam In-soo to happen in such a fortunate way, but Kim Dong-hyun refused to listen to his opponent and began to attack him. He turned to Kim Dong-hyun and said that there was no need to fight and that he should go and rescue his friend Park Han-yoon. Then he walked away from Kim Dong-hyun and headed towards Nam In-soo, saying that he intended to deal with the traitor. Nam In-soo himself told Kim Dong-hyun to go to Park Han-yoon, promising that he would definitely take care of it himself. Lee Moon-kil felt a kind of excitement because he had been holding back Park Han-yoon for so long. But now his new target, Nam In-soo, had arrived. Nam In-soo then began to attack his opponent, suggesting that they play rock and roll. Meanwhile, the group still couldn't defeat Park Han-yoon. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon managed to escape from the net that had been thrown at him, and the remaining fighters hung on him. Baek Moon-yeon was annoyed that Park Han-yoon had attacked him. Then Kim Dong-hyun appeared and said to Park that he had grown old because he had allowed himself to be held under the net for so long. But Park Han-yoon said that he was just having fun while waiting for Kim Dong-hyun. And then, when they met, they didn't wait any longer and began to strike their opponents. Suddenly, Park Moon-yeon, angry at Park and Kim Dong-hyun, decided to come up with another plan to defeat them. He wrapped a rope around his arm and rushed straight at his opponents. He gained momentum and immediately pounced on Kim Dong-hyun, and Park Han-yoon was able to see this out of the corner of his eye. Then he rushed straight down with Kim Dong-hyun, grabbing him very tightly. At one point, Baek Moon-yeon simply let go of Kim Dong-hyun, but Kim Dong-hyun still tried not to fall. When he grabbed Park Moon-yeon's leg, Park Moon-yeon yelled at him to finally let go of his leg. But Kim Dong-hyun tried not to let go, and his trained legs, which he used to brace himself against the wall, helped him hold on. Then, Kim Dong-hyun pushed off the wall, and the two of them headed straight for the building's window. Kim Dong-hyun smashed the window with his whole body, and it didn't take long for him to get inside. Baek Moon-yeon remained hanging, holding onto the rope with his hand and staring at the wall of the building. Suddenly, he looked up and saw a hand grabbing the rope he was holding onto. It was Park Han-yoon, pulling him back to the place where they had been fighting. Park Han-yoon looked at him with eyes filled with rage, saying that it was Park Moon-yeon's turn. Park Moon-yeon begged Park Han-yoon to let go of the rope, realizing what was coming and how things would turn out. Park Han-yoon seemed not to hear his words, and with a sharp movement of his hands, forced Park Moon-yeon to fly towards him. It was not difficult for Park Moon-yeon to understand that his end was very near. After prolonged blows from Park Han-yoon, he asked him to stop. But then Kim Dong-hyun appeared and asked Park not to continue because he had his own score to settle with him. Park Han-yoon listened to his friend and gave him 5 minutes to finish what he had started. When Kim Dong-hyun approached Park Moon-yeon, he reminded him of the common cause that they had failed to complete. Kim Dong-hyun ordered him to get up, saying that they had just enough time for one round. Baek Moon-yeon did so, and with very unflattering words, began his attack on Kim Dong-hyun. But his attack did not last long, as Kim Dong-hyun immediately counterattacked, defending himself from Baek Moon-yeon's attack. Kim Dong-hyun continued to strike him, saying that Park Moon-yeon's victories could not be called real victory. Comparing him to trash, he said that all his moves were just cheap bluffs. Suddenly, Park Han-yoon joined them, and Kim Dong-hyun did not understand why, because the 5 minutes he had been given were not over yet. But Park Han-yoon only said that he could no longer control his emotions. And then the two best friends decided to continue the fight with their opponent together. Park Moon-yeon, realizing what awaited him in the next few seconds, begged pitifully for them to wait. But Park Han-yoon and Kim Dong-hyun didn't even listen to him, simply ignoring his request and continuing to attack. Then he knelt before Kim Dong-hyun, begging for mercy. He shouted that he admitted defeat and promised never to approach their company again. He begged them to give him just one chance. Park then handed the nail puller to his friend, saying that it was impossible to finish what Park Moon-hyun had started with words. Park Moon-hyun, realizing what was going on, cried and shouted that he wasn't bluffing, and sincerely promised to change. But Kim Dong-hyun did not answer him, only swinging his weapon, frightening Park Moon-hyun. But Kim Dong-hyun was not like that scoundrel, and swung his weapon past his opponent. Then he told Park Han-yoon that he wasn't going to be like Baek Moon-hyun, and suggested they leave. But then Park Han-yoon finished what he had started instead of his friend Kim Dong-hyun, saying that Baek Moon-hyun wouldn't stop so easily. In the end, Park Han-yoon ended up behind the building in full view of everyone, his body held up by the rope he had climbed up on. Lee Moon-kil, seeing this, noted that Park Han-yoon's end had definitely come. Then he and his company raised their hands, showing their intention to surrender. And Lee Moon-kyul said that they would definitely meet again. Our heroes watched all this from above and just stood silently. Then Kim Dong-hyun turned to his friend Park and asked who their next target would be. Park Han-yoon replied without hesitation that their next target was someone named Kim Jong-soo. Then he looked up and said that now it was his turn to be punished. Time passed, and someone sat in a hospital room in a wheelchair due to numerous injuries. At the same time, Park Han-yoon was waiting for a group of guys. Park Han-yoon approached them, closer and closer, completely calm and not worried about anything. The leader of the group shouted to his guys that they had nothing to fear because they outnumbered them. But they definitely didn't know that Park Han-yoon himself would come to meet them, and it was a surprise for them. And of course, Park Han-yoon, approaching them, immediately began to attack without unnecessary conversation. After inflicting damage on the leader of their group, he immediately set about the rest, and of course, he did it perfectly. Chu So-hyun could only watch the news about Park Han-yoon, who had finished clearing out the Dongsan school, but director Oh Jun-woo seemed not to be listening to his assistant Chu So-hyun and was probably thinking about something else. Then he asked her to be quiet for a minute, explaining that he needed to concentrate and think carefully. And then he misled Cho So-hyun by suddenly saying that he understood what the cunning man had in mind. He said that Pascal took first place in the store just 3 hours after its release. And even after a whole week, its popularity had not changed. And then the company's stock prices rose 6-fold. But Cho So-hyun did not understand what he was talking about at all, and saw no connection in his statements. Meanwhile, a small meeting was also taking place at Nexus. They discussed how Park Han-yoon's group was taking over schools one by one that were directly connected to them. Director Oh Jun-woo said that there were rumors that Nexus feared Park Han-yoon and was avoiding direct confrontation. If this continued, it would be very difficult for Nexus to maintain control. Lee Moon-gil told Jung-soo that they couldn't keep ignoring this and needed to make a decision. Then, the head of Nexus Security, Leon, said that they only needed a week to carry out their plan. Jung-soo said that they needed to avoid a clash with Park Han-yoon and hold out for another week at all costs. Leon added that they were big enough to withstand what he considered to be childish attacks. But as he left, Jung-soo repeated that they needed to be patient a little longer, and then he would make everything change dramatically. Then he noted that the 100 million won would also end up in their hands. Suddenly, Lee Moon-kil said that he had an idea on how to defeat their rivals. Jung-soo turned to him and nodded, allowing him to proceed. Meanwhile, Cho So-hyun told her friends that Nam In-soo and Park Han-yoon would deal with the schools she had named. Then, turning the pages of her notes, she turned to Kim Dong-hyun. She mentioned Dongtaek High School and the name Choi Pek-hyun. Then she slammed her notebook shut and said that their meeting was over for the day. After that, she smiled sweetly and said that their next meeting would be tomorrow at lunchtime. After everyone started to leave, Cho So-hyun put on her helmet and was ready to leave, but someone called out to her. It was Kim Dong-hyun, who expressed his suspicion that she probably hadn't told them everything she wanted to. He said he knew that she had attended Dongtaek High School. She began to take off her helmet and said that there was one very sensitive guy among the monsters, referring to Kim Dong-hyun. Then she threw her helmet into his hand, but Kim Dong-hyun didn't quite understand what it meant. She turned to him and told him to hop on her bike and suggested they get some fresh air. Then she noted that he could only do it if he really wanted to. After a while, they were both sitting on a bench, just silent. She suddenly looked up and began her story with what happened 2 years ago. She said that at that moment, she was part of Nexus. The story continued with what happened long before she grew up, when she looked into the room where her mother was. Her little brother, holding a cute teddy bear in his hand, asked her what had happened to their mother and where their father had gone. Then she couldn't hold back her tears either, and yelled at her brother for not understanding that they no longer had a father. Hearing this, her little brother also burst into tears, completely unable to understand what was happening in his family. The fact was that their father had a girlfriend on the side, which he had been hiding all this time. And when their father abandoned the family, their mother had to work very hard to feed them. Choi So-hyun hated the house they lived in because there were bugs everywhere, which was one of the reasons for her hatred. She tried in every way to escape from home to school as soon as possible, and her mother wished her luck every time. And in the end, she started spending time with those who were like her, for the sake of feeling like she belonged to something. At that time, they gathered in large groups, and she liked Nexus for its sense of security and impunity. Later, Cho So-hyun's homeroom teacher approached her at school. He came up to her and told her to follow him, and she did so without asking any questions. As she followed him, she asked him to spare her the lectures she didn't need, since she was going to drop out anyway. But he turned around and replied curtly that he had no intention of interfering in her complicated life. But he was curious as to why she had started studying in the first place, if she intended to drop out and leave. He told her that he had seen her math test results, which were 80 points, and that was quite a lot. But she just shouted back at him that she had simply guessed most of the answers. Then he handed her her backpack and told her not to talk nonsense. He told her to continue studying, because some people couldn't get that many points, even if they tried very hard. The textbooks were neatly folded in the backpack, and he told her to throw them away if she didn't need them. He asked her to come to class until she dropped out, and also said that he did not intend to take responsibility for her life. As he left, he asked her to try not to cause any more problems in the future. She certainly learned a lesson from her homeroom teacher's words, and hugged her backpack with textbooks tightly. Surrounded by the other kids, her Nexus was completely crushed and depressed. She watched as someone simply extorted money from the kids who were not part of their gang. She watched as innocent students at this school tearfully promised to bring them a larger amount of money next time than they had brought before. But their promises were simply unnecessary to those people, because they had no intention of letting them go, and were determined to teach them a lesson. And then Cho So-hyun jumped up from where she was sitting, and rushed straight to where it was all happening. She ran up and threw her backpack right at the scoundrel's head. She started yelling at him that he had lost his mind, and that he couldn't treat middle-class kids like that. She yelled at him that even for him, these actions were extremely low. One of the group grabbed her by the hair and, addressing her in very unflattering terms, said that she had crossed all boundaries. He told her to look at her own worthless life first, and then talk about the lives of others. After that, he hit her in the face, and she staggered, barely managing to stay on her feet. Then she fell onto the asphalt, and her attacker ordered her to be quiet and not say another word. At that moment, someone appeared, picked up a bat, and began to scatter the thugs in different directions. It didn't take long for him to overcome everyone who stood in his way, and he headed straight for Cho So-hyun. When she saw who the man was, she was in complete shock and didn't understand why he had come there. It turned out that this person was her younger brother. The members of the gang had no idea who he was, and immediately rushed at him to attack. But the one who was about to attack him fell to the side a second after his attempt. Then he grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into the ground. Choi So-hyun was shocked and shouted her brother Park Hyun's name. But Park Hyun didn't seem to hear her, and, picking up a motorcycle helmet, began to attack his opponent in the face. And when he was done with that scoundrel, he sarcastically said that it was very nice to meet him. Then he said that he was the new head of the branch in Kangdong. Then he turned to the others and introduced himself as Chae Park Hyun. Cho So-hyun described her brother as an obedient and kind son who was not useless, unlike herself. His change began after he was beaten up by a group of people who broke his glasses and made hurtful comments about his sister. Then, Cho So-hyun's family abandoned her, and the school did not allow her to live a normal life. And then he decided that he simply had to become stronger than he was then. It wasn't long before rumors about Cho Pek-hyun spread throughout the school when he was able to defeat 4 people. This didn't surprise many, as everyone thought he looked like a gangster, and his sister was a member of Nexus. That day, several other strong guys approached him and talked about how Cho Pak-hyun had defeated the guys from their gang. But they didn't come to settle any scores, but to offer him membership in Nexus. And on that fateful day, Cho Pak-hyun became a member of Nexus. He did it so that no one would ever mess with him again. But one fine day, a trap was set for him, and his friend tried to warn him about it. Then, a huge number of angry guys, armed with weapons, rushed at him to fight him. But it was no trouble for him to deal with the attacker. After all, he had already become a completely different person who never runs away. That battle turned out to be too long and dirty for him, and then he was able to realize his limits. And just when he thought he had lost, someone came to his aid. It was the blonde-haired Kim Jong-soo who stopped the dirty fight. None of those guys understood why Jong-soo himself had come to this place. Then, Cho Pak-hyun realized that he simply hated looking at other people's backs. Behind those backs, he saw his father and sister, who had abandoned their family. He also felt the same way about the backs of scoundrels who could slander him at any moment. But on that day, his opinion changed, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to think differently. And at that moment, he promised himself and swore one important thing. He decided that he was ready to follow this guy anywhere. And after he stood up for his sister, she asked him why he joined Nexus, hanging her head. But he only replied that she had no right to ask about it. He said that he was only following Jong-soo's orders, because Jong-soo had made him the boss in this area. Then he told her not to get involved in this matter, and not to interfere. Otherwise, there would be consequences for her, even though they were family. Then he told his sister that otherwise, he would take her life. Later, he discussed with his comrades that the teachers did not want to cooperate, and did not understand how dangerous Nexus could be for them. Then he told them that everything had to change, and that they had to do exactly as he said. But they refused to listen to him, pointing out that he was much younger than them. And then he began to attack them, intending to prove that age was completely irrelevant, because power ruled everything. And when Cho Pak-hyun took his life, everyone looked at him and his actions with horror. Choi Pek-hyun then said that anyone who didn't like something could come to him for an explanation at any time convenient for them. But then he also told them all to remember one important thing. He explained that if they wanted an explanation, they would all have to be prepared for what they had just seen. Choi So-hyun just watched what was happening from the sidelines. After that, Choi Pek-hyun began to mock the teachers and simply destroyed their homes and all the furniture in them. He was cunning and relentless, and did not spare even those who were close to the teachers. After numerous instances of bullying, the teachers began to resign one after another. But there was one who was not afraid of his students, and did not intend to write a letter of resignation. He believed that it was wrong to abandon the children who had become victims of those people, and felt that he had to take care of them. And then the teacher, who decided to fight to the end, crossed a line he should not have crossed. And then, while in the hospital, he said that he would soon recover and everything would be fine, while asking about his students. Choi So-hyun deeply regretted that she had once become part of Nexus, and from that day on, she decided to take responsibility and destroy Nexus. And returning to the present, she summed up her story about herself by saying that people cannot be changed so easily. She also explained, lowering her head, that along with Nexus, her brother must also be dealt with. But Kim Dong-hyun promised her then that he would try to fix it. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon had already managed to clear out Bongcheon-dong High School. Nam In-soo also successfully cleared out Choryeon High School. Kim Dong-hyun was still on his way to his intended target. When he arrived at the school, he was extremely surprised by the absence of people there. When Cho So-hyun was riding her bike, she was stopped by a girl who stood right in the road and asked for help. When she stopped and asked what was wrong, the girl said she didn't believe that Cho So-hyun was once called smart. Choi So-hyun herself was extremely surprised to hear this, and just stared at her with wide eyes. And then, before long, Choi So-hyun was simply surrounded. She was then ordered to follow them silently if she didn't want to get into trouble. But suddenly, he touched his shoulder, and she picked up her helmet and hit him with it. But she was immediately grabbed by the hair from behind and ordered to follow them. Choi So-hyun pushed the girl away with her elbow, showing her resistance with her whole body. But her attempts to resist did not last long, and just as she was about to give up, she was hit on the head from behind. When she came to, she found herself locked in a room. She banged on the locked door with all her might and shouted at her brother to let her out immediately. When he came, he asked his friend how long she had been screaming, and he replied that she had been screaming for about 2 hours. Then he walked up to the door, leaned his foot against it, and told her to listen carefully to what he was about to say. He ordered her to sit quietly, and only then would nothing bad happen to her. He explained that if she made a scene again, it would be considered interference in Jung Soo-hyun's affairs. She then dropped the phone and said she would just lie there as he demanded. But she also added that it was more likely that he would not return home safe and sound. Meanwhile, Lee Moon-gil informed Jeon Soo-hyun that Cho So-hyun had been captured and that Park's group valued loyalty. That is why he was confident that this would buy them enough time. Jeon Soo-hyun listened to him and said to continue following the plan. He added that they were on the home stretch. Meanwhile, director Oh Jun-woo gathered the guys and told them to try their best not to take any measures to rescue Cho So-hyun. He explained that since they had come to such measures, they could not take any big risks. But he also said that Jeon Soo-hyun's condition would continue to worsen, and at some point, he would no longer be able to stop him. Therefore, he decided that even though it was risky, they needed to continue attacking Nexus. After listening to director Oh Jun-woo, Nam In-soo had a question. He said that his manipulations could not be resolved by simple attacks on school gangs because the stock price was already at a record high. Nam In-soo then suggested that they had already lost this battle. Hearing this, director Oh Jun-woo thought for a moment and said nothing. But then he laughed and replied to Nam In-soo that it looked that way to him. He then told him to remember one thing, that they always fight dirty and unpleasant. But he added that despite all this, they always win. The fact is that Nexus said the same thing as Nam In-soo, that by manipulating the stock market, he was able to increase the value of the company 8-fold. But an important fact was that their plan was not yet complete, because they were still trying to buy time. Then, director Oh Jun-woo said that the final stage was coming, which was a game of short selling. Park Han-yoon did not quite understand this statement and asked Oh Jun-woo to explain it. He said that short selling is something other than borrowing shares and cashing out everything. And when it is time to return the borrowed shares, they buy the same shares to repay the loan. The director understood that Jong-soo intended to bet on this strategy in order to maximize profits, and according to the information he received, Nexus would have to return them in 5 days. Then director Oh Jun-woo said that his comrades needed to stop him, but Kim Dong-hyun was more concerned about what they needed to do to save Chae So-hyun. Oh Jun-woo said that she had already been tracked down by a bug in her earring and could be rescued at any time. Kim Dong-hyun immediately flew into a rage after hearing this, because the director had not told him about it right away. Oh Jun-woo himself could not help but notice Kim Dong-hyun's violent reaction. When Oh Jun-woo asked Kim Dong-hyun if he had fallen in love, Kim didn't even know how to respond and froze for a moment. Then he replied that it wasn't about that at all, but that if someone from their company was in trouble, they needed to rush to their rescue. Director Oh Jun-woo suggested not to dwell on this, but nevertheless considered Kim Jun-woo's reaction to be very appropriate. Then Jun-woo said that they didn't have much time, and if the guys understood everything, he would tell them to go and carry out their plans. But Park Han-yoon said that he still didn't understand anything. Nam In-soo said that they didn't need to think too much about it, because their only task was to win the battle. As Park Han-yoon and Nam In-soo were leaving, the director added that dealing with the financial issue would be his responsibility alone. Meanwhile, our heroes had already arrived at the place where their friend Cho So-hyun was hidden and encountered a large number of fighters. Park Han-yoon told Kim Dong-hyun to go ahead while he cleared the way. When this happened, one of the group ran to the leaders and reported that Park Han-yoon and Kim Dong-hyun had broken through. At first, he didn't understand how they were able to find them, but then it dawned on him that Cho So-hyun had a tracking device on her. Choi So-hyun turned to him and said that his games were over and that his end was coming soon. Suddenly, he opened the door to the room where Choi So-hyun was locked up and said that she didn't understand the situation at all. He looked at her with wild eyes and said that only she herself would meet her end here. Meanwhile, our heroes continued to fight and actively moved forward toward their goal. When Dong-hyun managed to reach Chae So-hyun, he saw that she was in the hands of her enemy, who ordered him not to move, threatening her life. He put a gun to her throat and asked Kim Dong-hyun if he understood what was happening. Then he pointed the gun directly at him and said he would give them one last chance to leave immediately. But Kim Dong-hyun stared at him stubbornly and remarked that things at home were probably going well. Choi Pek-hyun himself had no idea what Kim Dong-hyun's gaze meant. Choi So-hyun took advantage of the moment when her brother's attention was weakened and threw him forward over her back. Then she turned to her brother and said that he was wrong to suspect that she was not prepared for such an outcome. And then Kim Dong-hyun immediately rushed to him to continue the fight instead of Choi So-hyun. Choi Pek-hyun finally understood why his sister had been so quiet all this time. Kim Dong-hyun didn't care how strong his opponent was and continued to fight actively. During the fight, Kim Dong-hyun tried to explain to Choi Pek-hyun that Jong-soo was simply using him, but Chae Pak-hyun did not want to listen to Kim Dong-hyun at all. Then Kim Dong-hyun said that he understood perfectly well that Pak just wanted to survive, but asked if he was satisfied with his current situation. He explained that Jong-soo did not care about Pak's future at all, and that was why he had put this weapon in his hand. Kim Dong-hyun was curious about what it was about Jong-soo that made Chae Pak-hyun follow him unconditionally. Saying that Kim Dong-hyun knew nothing, he lunged at him with an attack, but it was unsuccessful. After that, Kim Dong-hyun said that he didn't need to know anything about his past. And when Kim Dong-hyun was about to leave, Chae Pak-hyun lowered his head and addressed him. He flew into a rage and started shouting that their battle was not over yet, because he had only just begun their fight. Kim Dong-hyun turned around and, striking him again, told him to calm down because his actions would not change anything. Seeing what was happening, memories from her childhood related to her brother began to surface in Cho So-hyun's mind. Then she couldn't take it anymore and stood right in front of her younger brother. She felt uncontrollable hatred for him and struck him. With tears in her eyes, she yelled at him to finally stop, calling him crazy. Turning to her brother, she said that because of Nexus, one person could be crippled forever. She also talked about Park, who had lost everything in his life because of Nexus, and about Oh Jun-woo, who had lost a friend because of Nexus. She tried to make him understand that Nexus was just using him and would throw him away as soon as he became useless. After saying this, she apologized to him for leaving him in a difficult moment. But her brother didn't want to listen to her at all and sarcastically asked what she was talking about. Kim Dong-hyun joined the conversation and asked him to be gentler with his sister because she had also gone through difficult times. Kim Dong-hyun held out his hand to him, saying that it was not too late to start over. For a second, Cho Pek-hyun seemed to ponder the words of the two people standing in front of him. Remembering his childhood and the pain he had to endure, he shook Kim Dong-hyun's hand, as if accepting his offer. But it turned out to be a cheap and dirty move, because he pulled Kim Dong-hyun toward him when his attention was weakened. He shouted that he could never betray Jong Soo-hyun. Kim Dong-hyun was sure that it would be much harder for Chae Pek-hyun to survive the betrayal when Jong Soo rejected him. Meanwhile, Leon and Jong Soo watched the stock chart in real time and couldn't believe their eyes. Leon told Jong Soo that they were now down 14%. Leon realized that a third party had probably interfered and ruined their plans. They tried everything they could to maintain their position, but all their attempts were in vain. Suddenly, Cho Pek-hyun ran up to them, eager to convey the news to his friend Jong Soo-hyun. He said they were in trouble and asked for his support. But Jong Soo didn't even listen to him, and instead of helping him, he started hitting him. He said that if Choi Pak-hyun really loved him, then he would have died fighting for him. He called him useless, and said that he should have gained a little more time by giving up his pathetic life, in his opinion. Jong Soo turned to Lee Moon-kil and gave the order to gather all the branch managers. In doing so, he intended to finally end all relations with Park Han-yoon's company. The next day, a meeting of all the Nexus elite was organized. He began the meeting by saying that his speech would not be long. He said that in 2 years, they had all achieved national dominance that no one before them had ever achieved. He was referring not only to power, but also to the amount of money, which no one could joke about. But then he started talking about the people who had reappeared and were getting in their way, referring to Park Han-yoon's company. He said that they could no longer be allowed to continue living because Nexus had its pride. At the end of his monologue, he ordered them to bring Park Han-yoon to him and kneel before him. After this impassioned speech, his order was accepted by all members of Nexus. But suddenly, before the meeting was over, everyone saw a car driving into their territory. Seeing this, none of them understood who it could be. The car sped into the territory and stopped right next to Jong Soo-hyun. Then the entire company, led by director Oh Jun-woo, got out of the car. Oh Jun-woo approached him, reminding him of their promise to meet again soon after their last meeting. He also reminded him of his promise that when they met, Jeon-soo would not have such a calm expression on his face as he did then. Jeon-soo looked at him and replied that he did not think he would come here in person. Oh Jun-woo said that he would never have achieved this if he were normal. Then, feeling excited, Oh Jun-woo suggested ending it all with a 3-on-3 battle. Jeon Soo-hyun replied that he didn't want to disappoint Oh Jun-woo. Oh Jun-woo then said that he intended to risk everything in this battle. He then proposed that if he won, he would destroy Nexus, and if he lost, he would give up everything he had and never bother them again. Then, feeling even more excited, Oh Jun-woo suggested that Jong Soo was simply afraid. After thinking about it, Jong Soo decided that it wasn't a bad deal. He then added another condition. If he lost, he would give them Park Han-yoon. At that point, Park Han-yoon himself joined the conversation and said he was ready to accept the terms. And then it was decided to start their battle, where the losing side would be the one that lost the ability to fight. And then, on their side, Chung-soo Lee Mun-kil and Kim Chi-hyuk, who was the head of the Kangwon branch, were put forward for battle. And then, surrounded by a large crowd, they decided to start a battle where each of them would risk their lives. Nam In-soo and Kim Chi-hyuk were the first to decide to fight, and the opponent, turning to Nam In-soo, said that it would be difficult for him because of the difference in weight. It wasn't long before their fierce battle with each other began. Nam In-soo was definitely having a hard time, but he wasn't going to give up. Kim Chi-hyuk knew that even though there was a weight difference, he was still able to hurt him pretty badly. Then, everyone saw Kim Chi-hyuk take off his shoes to keep fighting. Everyone understood that since he was now without shoes, an entertaining fight awaited them. Director Oh Jun-woo shouted at Nam In-soo to be careful and not let him grab him, otherwise it would be the end for him. But before he could think about it, his opponent managed to grab him. Choi So-hyun shouted at him to pull himself together, and that it was not over yet. The fact was that there were rumors about Kim Chi-hyuk, that he had uprooted a sprawling village tree. Before their fight, Oh Jun-woo explained to Nam In-soo that despite everything, he was still much stronger than him. And then he told Oh Jun-woo that he had no intention of giving up, even if his chances of winning were slim. Oh Jun-woo then said that a person always has a chance to catch a bull by the horns. And when Nam In-soo finally managed to break free from Kim Chi-hyuk's grip, everyone was very surprised. Nam In-soo then realized that if he fell into his hands again, it would definitely be the end for him. Nam In-soo then turned on his brain and realized that he needed to block his opponent's vision. Then he decided to continue boxing and attack his opponent again. But that was still not enough to cause significant damage to his opponent. However, one of the blows did noticeably shake him. Meanwhile, Nam In-soo continued to cover his opponent's eyes and then strike him again and again. When Lee Moon-kil saw the smiling face of Oh Jun-woo, he realized one very important thing. When he realized this, he immediately shouted at Kim Chi-hyuk to wait, but he didn't hear him and was attacked with a knee strike. However, Kim Chi-hyuk seized the moment and still managed to grab Nam In-soo by the leg. Kim Dong-hyun watched all this and realized that their fight was not over yet, but Nam In-soo's agility helped him escape his opponent's grasp once again and get back on his feet. Everyone saw the look in his eyes and felt that Nam In-soo had gone mad. And then Nam In-soo seemed to turn into a real beast, as evidenced by his furious eyes. Indeed, Nam In-soo's mental processes were suppressed, and now he was a beast, driven by instinct. Then Kim Chi-hyuk, realizing that he was losing this battle, decided to go all in as well. He grabbed Nam In-soo again and seemed to fly into the air with him. When they landed on the ground, Nam In-soo had time to catch himself thinking that his life was coming to an end. In the end, Nam In-soo still managed to defeat Kim Chi-hyuk, which amazed everyone at Nexus. Now Lee Moon-kil, one of the founders of Nexus and its strongest fighter, appeared on the battlefield. After landing the first blow on Nam In-soo, he suggested that he lie down, assuming that he would no longer be able to fight. He called his blow a gift for Nam In-soo, showing him an excellent fight. Then he turned to Kim Dong-hyun, challenging him to a fight. He urged him, saying that this city was too small for two guys with red hair. Kim Dong-hyun walked towards him, saying that it would be extremely difficult for his opponent to grow his long hair back. At that moment, the second fight began, with everything at stake. Everyone was amazed that Lee Moon-kil immediately began to use Chinese martial arts in real combat. Chu So-hyun was curious about how Lee Moon-kil knew Chinese martial arts at such a high level. Then Oh Jun-woo explained that Lee Moon-kil was the heir to the most influential and criminal organization. As they fought, Lee Moon-kil felt that his opponent was superior in his weight class. Kim Dong-hyun understood that Lee Moon-kil surpassed him in technique and talent, and he thought about the only option available to him. Then he decided to strike the same spot over and over again, which was the best solution at the time. But Lee Moon-kil immediately understood what Kim Dong-hyun was trying to do and said that this option would not work on him. After several blows from Lee Moon-kil, Kim Dong-hyun realized that his collarbone was probably broken. Kim Dong-hyun had once been hit in the collarbone. Then a fight broke out between his attackers and Park Han-yoon. And then, for the first time, he was able to see the overwhelming power of his friend. Kim Dong-hyun asked Park Han-yoon how he could become as strong as him. Park Han-yoon replied that there was no secret. He just responded to their blows with his own. Kim Dong-hyun always understood that he could never be like Park Han-yoon, but he never wanted to be exactly like him and trained hard to become stronger. He understood that now he needed to play dumb and just go for it. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hyun inflicted such damage on his opponent that he couldn't move because his leg was broken. After that, Kim Dong-hyun grabbed him by the hair and reminded him of what he had said earlier, that Lee Moon-kil thought that would not be enough. Then he asked if he still thought the same way after what had happened. But suddenly, Lee Moon-kil began to attack him in response, saying that he could not lose to Kim Dong-hyun. Their fierce battle continued, and Lee Moon-kil was able to detect damage to his body. This was surprising, because Lee Moon-kil was born in a place where it was only possible to survive through martial arts. In order to survive, he underwent grueling training time and time again. But Lee Moon-kil had no talent, so the demands were too high for him. He had no talent, and his family referred to him as the curse of their entire family. This became the starting point for Lee Moon-kil to work and try harder than he could. This meant that he did the same thing thousands of times, while talented people only needed to do it once. At that time, Lee Moon-kil was convinced that his actions would earn him the recognition of his family. But all these efforts were in vain, because, despite his efforts, his family adopted a new heir. And then his father asked him to renounce his right to inherit the throne. But Lee Moon-kil only asked for a chance, because he had put a lot of effort into proving his destiny to his family. And then his father told him that if he could defeat the new member of the clan, the position would be his by right. This turned out to be an unfair decision, because Lee Moon-kil was simply pathetic compared to the talent of the new family member. Although Lee Moon-kil was defeated, he refused to admit it in any way. After what happened, Lee Moon-kil was forced to leave his family home. He was too angry at his family and fate, and understood that he simply had to become stronger. He swore to himself that his efforts would surpass any talent that everyone praised so much. Then he faced a second insurmountable wall. In a battle with Jong-soo, he realized that there was another monster, and it was on that very evening that Jeon Song-hyun said he needed a friend as strong as Lee Moon-kil. And then he made the decision to follow Jeon Soo-hyun all the time. And then this battle became dangerous for both combatants because they simply could not see the end of their rage. Chu So-hyun asked director Oh Jun-woo to stop them and was worried that Kim Dong-hyun would be seriously injured again. But then Park Han-yoon joined the conversation and told her not to interfere because it was Kim Dong-hyun's battle. Park Han-yoon said that no one should interfere in their fight because this battle belonged only to the two of them. At the moment of the fight, Kim Dong-hyun realized that his body was screaming from the pain he was experiencing. He understood that he could not keep up with Lee Moon-kil's strength. Kim Dong-hyun then struck him again, realizing that he could not lose because there was too much at stake. After the double knockout, Lee Moon-kil approached Jong-soo and told him that he had done well. Park Han-yoon also supported his friend and asked him to leave the rest to him. Then, Park Han-yoon and Jong Song-hyun entered the battlefield. Jong Soo-hyun immediately told Park Han-yoon to kneel down as he had done 2 years ago. Jong Soo-hyun asked Park why he had become so obsessed with Nexus. Park Han-yoon replied that thanks to Nexus, he had experienced humiliation. Park said that despite the time that had passed, all those emotions remained with him and moreover, annoyed him. Then, Park Han-yoon gathered momentum and rushed to attack his opponent. Their battle continued, and everyone could see that Jeon Soo-hyun was much faster than Park Han-yoon. At that moment, Jeon Soo-hyun had a bad feeling that came from within. There were always rumors that Kim Jong-soo was able to predict his opponent's next move, but Jong-soo himself behaved as if he could really see the future and continued to attack Park Han-yoon. Jong-soo said that Park Han-yoon would not be able to defeat him using only his strength and adaptability. Jong-soo began to approach Park Han-yoon and tell him that he had been wrong to consider himself special all this time. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hyun sat by the car and thought that Park Han-yoon could not lose, even though his fight had ended in a draw. He kept thinking that they had put everything they had and even more on the line in this battle. Then Park stood up and walked towards his opponent, saying that he was no longer going to listen to his comments. After these words, the atmosphere definitely changed, and there was even more tension in the air. Images of Park Han-yoon defeating him began to appear in Jeon Soo-hyun's mind, and he realized that it was all just his imagination. But Jeon Soo-hyun's visions deceived him, and he was attacked right in the stomach. He tried to anticipate Park Han-yoon's movements, but each of his visions deceived him. No one understood how Park Han-yoon was able to gain the upper hand and do it out of nowhere. Then, Oh Jun-woo said that Park had been holding back all this time and trying to defeat him without killing him. Chu So-hyun didn't quite understand what Oh Jun-woo meant. Oh Jun-woo said that Park Han-young had now decided not to be lenient with him. This explains why Park Han-young's father did not teach him martial arts, even though he had his own gym. The reason was that if a person with such a body made a mistake, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Despite the fact that he never learned anything, he continued to become stronger thanks to real experience. After all, he considered Park Han-yoon to be a monster who evolves on his own. After several attacks from Park Han-yoon, he asked his opponent what he saw next. Jong Soo-hyun had been admired since childhood because everything came easily to him. But there was one thing he could never overcome in his entire life, and that was money and absolute power. And then he saw an opportunity to found Nexus in order to make all his dreams come true. It was a life where there were no guilty parties, and where, when people died, the culprit was safe thanks to money and power. And he understood that by using money, he could step over every one of his haters. And then, when he encountered Park Han-yoon, he felt ecstasy. He laughed out loud, saying that he had probably just gone mad. He laughed because he had no reason to fight in terms of money or power. He laughed and shouted that his plans were falling apart, but he didn't understand the reason for his laughter. Then Kim Jong-soo said that he could see not only the future, but also Park Han-yoon's weaknesses, and began to attack him. Lee Moon-kil said that if they both fought from the heart, the other side would clearly be stronger. Lee Moon-kil said that neither of them had an advantage, so one mistake could change everything. Chong-soo then thought that he could finally see everything he needed to see, and couldn't believe it. He saw something crazy, but at the same time, felt incredibly great. At the moment of that battle, Jong-soo realized that he simply wanted to wipe his opponent off the face of the earth. This battle could safely be called a fierce duel between two monsters. Suddenly, a man appeared behind them, standing under an umbrella and demanding that they stop fighting immediately. It was Leon, who turned to Lee Jong-soo and told him to stop because it was all over. But Jong-soo told him not to interfere, believing that if he won, everything would be fine. But he said that he had already failed once, and now history would definitely repeat itself. Park Han-yoon joined the conversation and demanded that they not interfere, as this matter did not concern him at all. When Park tried to forcibly push Leon away, Cheon-soo stopped his hand. Cheon-soo then loudly announced to everyone that from that moment on, Nexus was officially disbanded. Everyone was surprised, including director Oh Jun-woo, whose eyes widened impossibly. Oh Junwoo began to shout that he did not understand his action and asked him not to treat him this way. Then Leon sarcastically said that Oh Junwoo had achieved what he wanted, as if he had something in mind. As he left, Leon told John Soo-hyun not to lose heart, as a new opportunity might arise. John Soo-hyun then sat down on the ground and, with his head bowed, wet from the rain, thought that he had indeed lost. Oh Junwoo was furious and lunged at Jeon-soo, demanding that he get up from the ground. He demanded that he not give up and kneel before Park Han-yoon. After what happened, Oh Junwoo called a meeting to discuss the possibility that there was something bigger than Nexus behind it all. At the same time, he said that he suspected that there was nothing they could do about it. Oh Junwoo did not consider what had happened a victory at all, because they had simply mocked their anger. And then he asked his comrades to give him time to find out what was behind Nexus, and then the battle would resume. And then it was decided to return to normal life for a while. They all had an extremely uneasy feeling that it was as if they had never fought Nexus. A month passed, and Cho So-hyun went to her usual store to shop. She talked to the cashier and tried to find out what he was going to do today. She was curious if he intended to become a man today, and asked him sarcastically about it. At that moment, the people who entered the store immediately recognized Cho So-hyun and started shouting that she was there. The cashier covered his eyes with his hands, thinking that when she was around, he behaved extremely foolishly. He mentally asked himself to relax, because he had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. He thought that Cho So-hyun was interested in him because she always bought the same food and came at the same time. And then he decided to take the first step and announced the amount to be paid. Then he wondered what might happen if he approached her. His move was to compliment her by offering her onigiri at his expense. But Cho So-hyun looked at him very strangely after this gesture. Then the guy thought that his actions might indeed seem too strange to her. But suddenly Cho So-hyun smiled and thanked him, gathering her groceries in her arms. The guy standing in front of her was simply stunned by her smile. Then he couldn't resist and, thinking it was love, asked her how she felt about children. But suddenly he saw motorcycles parked right outside the store. After that, a big guy came in and said he knew he would find Cho So-hyun in this place. The cashier watched this and thought he couldn't let this guy talk to his princess in such a tone. Then thoughts began to run through his head that she might be being harassed by some hooligans or gangsters. Then he saw the big guy eat the onigiri he had bought for his princess. And when the big guy said he would wait outside and headed for the exit, the cashier realized that he was definitely evil. But suddenly, Cho So-hyun hid under her jacket and asked the cashier if there was a back entrance to the store. The cashier pointed to the door and told her she could leave that way. He then addressed her as a lovely lady and asked her to take care of herself. When she thanked him as she left, the cashier thought she was the embodiment of beauty. Suddenly, the cashier ran out of his store and shouted at the guy who was the sushi thief. And then he challenged him to a duel, saying that he was ready to get the sushi he had eaten back himself. And then that huge man, who looked like a rock, launched an attack on the poor and painfully compassionate cashier. But the cashier turned out to be quite a fighter, and struck back without taking any damage from his opponent. It didn't take long for the unremarkable cashier to knock everyone in the group to the ground. Then he looked up at the sky and realized that he had committed this madness in the name of love. And then, after Nexus disappeared, the world became like a forest without a tiger. And when Nexus was gone, other beasts seemed to go hunting and began to show their teeth. And after the emergence of new groups, people began to call them the second catastrophe. Suddenly, Kim Dong-hyun appeared out of nowhere and began attacking the cashier, asking where Chae So-hyun was now. But he began shouting that love is power and demanded that no one bother his goddess anymore. One of the defeated guys yelled at Kim Dong-hyun to be careful because he was facing a kickboxing master. Kim Dong-hyun immediately realized that this guy was definitely strong and that there were more and more people like him. The cashier himself then told Kim Dong-hyun that he didn't think he would meet someone like him in Korea. And then, striking Kim Dong-hyun, he said that in that case, he was not going to control himself. But then Cho So-hyun appeared, shouting and demanding an answer to the question of what they were both doing there. They both stopped when they heard Cho So-hyun's voice and were simply stunned. Then the cashier bowed to them all and apologized because he thought they were robbers. Choi So-hyun herself was amazed by them because she didn't understand why they couldn't just ask before starting a fight. When the group started to leave, the cashier thought he would never see his lady again. He never expected that the girl from the convenience store would see her in such a light. One fine day, Park Han-yoon was visited by the director of the company, Oh Jun-woo. Park Han-yoon then realized that Oh Jun-woo had come to him for a reason and asked for the name of their new target. After that, the director called a meeting and said that all this time there had been an organization covering for Nexus. Park Han-yoon then suggested that by beating up those guys, it was possible that John Soo-hyun would show up again. Oh Jun-woo said that there was a problem with money, because victory was only possible with money and power. and then they decided to prepare thoroughly and try to become the top of this nation. Meanwhile, at the meeting of this top group, it was discussed that one of their family members had made a mistake, for which apologies were offered. One of them said about two people, assuming that they were similar but had different mothers. One of the group said that Ryan definitely lacked leadership qualities and would not be able to influence respected citizens. And then he offered himself to take care of it. Then a girl who was sitting at the meeting with them said that she knew a very effective way to make their wishes come true. Then the leader of that group thought that he should have prepared in advance for the outcome of events with Nexus. Then a decision was made to establish a hierarchy before they became adults. Finally, young Yu Bin was released from the Hwanghae Correctional Facility. The employees of this institution did not understand what was happening because the world was simply in chaos. Then Yang Yu Bin, who had been convicted of attempted murder, was released. When Yang Yu Bin was released, he felt the extremely fresh street weather and air. He was met by two girls who did not understand why he had been gone for so long, because Mr. Oni was waiting for him. One of the girls was Lim Sang-ah from a well-known credit company. He was then given a task to form an organization that could notice Nexus. But his first target was Park Han-yoon, and he didn't understand what was so special about that, as he had no power. Then, Lim Sang-ah explained that there was real chaos in schools across the country. She explained that there were also people who wanted to fill the vacant positions in Nexus due to competition between new organizations. Then she said that there was no point in creating a new organization as long as Park Han-yoon existed. She then immediately asked him about his ideas for creating new organizations. Yang Yu Bin then said that they would only be able to solve the problem with him if someone appeared who was many times stronger than him. She then said that she had prepared a stage for him where he could go wild and she would cover for him. Meanwhile, outside the windows of a house, there was arguing about money. A man from that apartment rushed out, saying that he could earn the money they were talking about. When he stepped outside, he saw Yang Yu Bin in front of him and was completely stunned. Yang Yu Bin then saw his interlocutor and asked how he was doing, addressing him by his name, Donghua. Donghua immediately understood who was standing in front of him, and moreover, recognized him when he saw his face, and simply could not find the words to continue the conversation. Then he hugged him tightly and asked when he had managed to get free. Yang Yu Bin asked why his friend was still here, since he was going to leave his home. Then he asked why he felt sorry for that terrible family. Suddenly, his friend demonstratively threw a sports bag on the floor. There was a huge amount of money in this bag, and Yang Yu Bin then said that once they solved some problems, they would be able to live their own lives. He said that in that case, Donghua would be able to settle down and escape from his parents. Then he looked into the distance and told Donghua that he should become his family. A few years ago, a bag containing valuable items was stolen. The thieves were Yang Yu Bin and Donghua, who ran away as fast as they could, having fun at the same time. Suddenly, something happened, and Donghua shouted to his friend to hide as quickly as possible. When the man who had been robbed caught up with them, he demanded that Donghua tell him where the man who had stolen his bag was hiding. Donghua simply apologized, saying that he had dropped the bag while running away. But the man who caught up with them clearly did not understand and did not believe a word he said. With the intention of seeing how long his offender could hold out, he began to attack him. Later, he and his friend talked, and Yang Yu Bin felt guilty about what had happened and said he would take all the blame. Then he promised Donghua that he would be responsible for him for the rest of his life. But he then said that he was not at all to blame, but he was still very pleased to hear this because they were family. When Park Han-yoon came to director Oh Jun-woo, he asked why Park was so serious and demanded an explanation. Park Han-yoon asked Oh Jun-woo who he thought would won if the battle with Jong-soo had not been completed. But Oh Jun-woo replied that it was obvious because Park always wins. Park Han-yoon then said that he wasn't sure he could win without question. Oh Jun-woo then said that they needed to come up with a more reliable way to win and think about a plan for the future. Meanwhile, Ryan and Jong-soo were also talking about that battle, and Jong-soo asked what the consequences would have been if he hadn't stopped him then. Ryan replied that it didn't matter what would have happened then, and that it was much more important for them to think about the future in order to win. Meanwhile, in the doorway, someone was running away so fast that they were too scared to even look back. They had no idea what was going on, or why that guy was running after them. He shouted to his friend that he thought that when Yang Yu Bin was locked up, Donghua would disappear with him. Then they could see Yang Yu Bin himself, looking at them from under his eyebrows. And then those guys were surrounded, with Donghua on one side and Yang Yu Bin on the other. Yang Yu Bin asked him if he could repeat to his face what he had said behind his back. He then said that he probably enjoyed imagining himself as the boss while Yang Yu Bin was away. Then he fell to his knees in front of him and apologized for his behavior, explaining that he had simply lost his mind. Then Yang Yu Bin said that he was not generous enough to just leave things as they were. He asked him to show him sincerity, because then he would no longer have to hide for the rest of his life. Then he picked up a brick from the ground, thanks to Yang Yu Bin. To prove his sincerity, the man hit his own hand with the brick, while Yang Yubin just watched. Later, they met with their other friend, and a girl from the group reminded Yang Yubin that she had asked him not to cause any trouble. The girl suggested that Yang Yubin was trying to show everyone how rude and uneducated he was. Yang Yubin replied that he had things to take care of. Then he talked about the money that was running out very quickly, because he was used to living on the edge and had spent everything on his children. She replied that she was willing to give him as much money as he needed, but in that case, he had to remember one thing. She told him to remember that from that moment on, he would have to do only what she told him to do, without any initiative. She said that he had to understand that there were things worse than his miserable life. He picked up the bag full of money and said that he wasn't sure that such a thing existed. But then he added that perhaps their trust in each other had grown stronger than it had been before. Meanwhile, Oh Junwoo discovered unusual activity in two areas. He was able to find a place where fierce battles for territory had previously taken place, but now it had suddenly become quiet. He also mentioned the area around Kangsong School, which had not been closed before, but had now begun to form alliances. He concluded that this was usually a sign of the emergence of a new, influential player. Choi So-hyun inquired, and said that one of them was a graduate of the colony, and the other was a transfer student. She said that only their origins gave rise to prejudice. Then she said she was ready to deal with the situation in the Kangsong area. Then she noted that she had never seen the guy before. Meanwhile, the cashier fell into despair, realizing that after the battle with Kim Dong-hyun, his goddess had not returned. Then he looked at his fist and realized that she probably didn't like violent and rough guys like him. Then he felt his heart breaking into pieces from unrequited love. He grieved and mentally asked her to come back, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not long after his pleading thoughts, his goddess appeared at the door of the store. She burst into the store and immediately ran up to him, addressing him by his name, Jung Jong-hyun, and noting that he was 19 years old. She said she knew that after Nexus disappeared, he had moved from Thailand to Korea. She also mentioned that a few days after the transfer, he had taken over all the schools in the Kangsong area. Then she demanded that he answer the question of who he really was. He involuntarily raised his hand to his face, which meant only that he was extremely surprised by what he had heard. Then he shouted at her that he knew nothing about the seizure of any schools. He began to shout at her that immediately after moving to Korea, he had simply kept quiet. But Cho So-hyun demanded that he stop joking and explain whether he knew anything about what she had said. But suddenly, the window next to her was broken, and an air conditioner flew straight towards her. It was the man who had approached the cashier and said that he had contacted his friends. It turned out that it was the Kangsong District Alliance, whose leader demanded that Jongju come out immediately. Meanwhile, Cho So-hyun was frightened and hid behind Jong Jo-woo. The cashier himself said that he thought there had been another misunderstanding. Heading towards them, he noted that it was not the best situation for a conversation, and said that he would bring them some regular water for ramen. Choi So-hyun, hearing what he was going to do, told him to wait while she called someone, but he just smiled and asked her not to worry about him. Then he promised her he would return before the ramen got soggy from the water. When he came out to the alliance, a fight immediately broke out between them. When they attacked him, all the attackers realized that his body was extremely hard and that he was quite strong. In the end, Chong-jo was able to deal with them in 3 minutes and shouted to his mistress, asking if her ramen was ready. When they were alone, she asked him again who he really was. But Jeonju felt uncertain and couldn't explain to her what she wanted to hear. He explained that first and foremost, he was a good student. He said that he had lived in Thailand because of his father's business and had recently transferred to a school in Korea. But at that school, he had to deal with bullying from the other students. He didn't want to get into a fight with them and held back, but they wouldn't leave him alone. In the end, he had to fight them and won decisively. He said that thanks to his father's friend, he had mastered the technique of Thai boxing, and so it became a real problem for him. After that fight, he began to get involved in various fights because students from other schools, hearing about his strength, tried to challenge him. And then he had to fight them, and they began to give him various nicknames. They continued to attack him again and again in the hope that they would be able to defeat him someday. He explained that this is exactly how events similar to what happened today unfolded. But Cho So-hyun simply refused to believe it, and then Jeonjo said that he himself did not understand why this could have happened. Then something happened that shocked them both even more, because when Jeonjo turned around, he saw a crowd of people bowing to him. Then the leader of this group said that they wanted to be close to strong people and asked him to become the head of the Kangsong district. And then the leader of this group begged him to allow them to follow him. But then Jeonjong said that this would not happen and asked them not to label him with strange labels. Hearing all this, Cho So-hyun could no longer restrain herself and laughed out loud. She told him that he was not like a scoundrel at all, and that despite this, he was an excellent fighter. Then she offered him a job with her, mentioning the high hourly wage. When he heard her offer to exchange numbers, his heart blossomed like a garden, He knelt before her and thanked her for the offer, saying that he was ready to follow her for the rest of his life and swearing his loyalty. It was at that moment that Cho So-hyun gained the alliance of the Kangsong district. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon came to his father and told him of his desire to become stronger. And then his father told him that he knew that someday the day would come when they would talk about it. Meanwhile, Kim Dong-hyun sat and remembered the battle with Lee Moon-kyung and the man from the store. He understood perfectly well that if he didn't stop Cho So-hyun, he wouldn't be sure of victory. At that moment, Cho So-hyun came up to him, took his drink in her hands, and asked why he was in a bad mood. He was surprised to see his opponent in that battle in the company of Cho So-hyun. Then, Cho So-hyun introduced Kim Dong-hyun to her henchman, who in turn began to talk again about his loyalty to her. He then shouted that he was ready to give his life for his love for Cho So-hyun, equating his love with loyalty to her. Kim Dong-hyun then whispered in Chae So-hyun's ear that he thought Jong Jo-woo was strange, to which she replied that her entire company was no less strange. Jong Jo then apologized to Kim Dong-hyun for what had happened between them, and Kim Dong-hyun replied that it was no problem. Jong Jo noted Kim Dong-hyun's fighting skills and asked if he had done anything like that before. Kim Dong-hyun replied with a serious expression that he had never practiced any martial arts. Jeon Jo then said that he could definitely sense the rough and intense atmosphere of that day in him, and that it was not something you would normally encounter. Jong Jo then suggested that Kim Dong-hyun was simply a genius. Jong Jo said that he could see a look in his eyes that was full of fighting spirit, but at the limit of his abilities. He felt that Kim Dong-hyun's limit was a state of sadness. Jong Jo then asked Kim Dong-hyun if he wanted to meet his master who had taught him. And then he told Kim Dong-hyun that it would be very useful for him. Jung-ju told Cho So-hyun that it was like destiny, because by a happy coincidence, this master was in Korea on business for his father. Cho So-hyun said that he looked quite wealthy and asked why he was working for half pay. He then said that the money belonged to his father and that he wanted to earn his own fortune. Then, a Thai boxing legend named Chai Thee-sik, a former 2-division champion, approached him. He saw Kim Dong-hyun's legs and tearfully asked him what he had done to create such legs. Then they both started talking about how amazing Kim Dong-hyun was. Then the master asked Kim Dong-hyun again if he really wanted to become stronger. He said that he had ignited his spirit and suggested that with his guidance and determination, he could become strong enough. He said that he hadn't felt this way in a long time, and that he would train him properly. Kim Dong-hyun bowed and said that he would follow his master unquestioningly. When Park Han-yoon was training, his coach said that there were 2 promises he had to make. He said that regardless of his emotions, he must not commit violence against those who do not wish to fight. The second condition was that Hanju is a martial art as a record of creating the ultimate power. He then said that humanity had discovered movements close to the correct answer. The master then said that studying martial arts meant learning about the heritage of humanity. He spoke of the responsibility and duty that Park Han-young had to promise. And at that moment, Park Han-young promised this with complete sincerity. Meanwhile, Yang Yu was in his office on a high floor, breathing a sigh of relief. He was talking to a girl from their company and suggested starting with Nam In-soo, but she reminded him that she had told him to deal with Park Han-yoon first. Yang Yu said that Nam In-soo was one of Park Han-yoon's associates. Yang Yu then said that he had a bit of history with this friend and therefore wanted to settle things quickly. She then suggested another solution, because if he couldn't catch Nam In-soo, he wouldn't be able to catch Park Han-yoon. She then suggested giving them both time to warm up. He replied that he would take care of finishing them off completely, as far as she trusted him. They then decided to go to Incheon immediately. Meanwhile, in Incheon, their actions had been anticipated for a long time, and preparations were being made for their visit. Among them was a man named Nam Hyung, who was a member of the reserve shot put team. There was also a man named Kim Kyung-tae, who was a member of the reserve javelin team, and at their head was Park Chang-min, who was a member of the reserve 100-meter sprint team. When Yang Yu-bin appeared, everyone recognized his familiar face. It wasn't long before orders came from both sides to get rid of each other. The Incheon fighters didn't understand what was going on and shouted for Nam In-soo's help. Yang Yu-bin then said that it had been a long time since he was last here. He said that they probably remembered the trouble he had caused a few years ago and then disappeared. Then he said that it was Nam In-soo who had hidden him for a while. Nam In-soo himself understood that the gangsters could come for him at any moment for hiding Yang Gu-bin. They had been through 1,000 battles together and had come to accept each other. Until that moment, Yang Yu-bin had thought of Incheon as his own family. Yang Yu-bin then turned to Donghua and said that now he was his only real family. To Nam In-soo, Yang Yu-bin was like a member of their family. Then, a large amount of money was found to be missing. Everyone understood that only one person had access to that room. Yang Yu-bin did not understand why all eyes were on him. Na Min-soo asked him if he had seen anyone who could have entered the room. Na Min-soo said that he had saved this money only to move to a better place. Yang Yu-bin then realized that Na Min-soo suspected him of stealing his money. Na Min-soo then began to say that this was not the case at all. Then, a man appeared who said he had seen everything that happened. He said he saw Yang Yu-bin rummaging behind the closet in the room. Yang Yu-bin then said that it was all a complete lie, and that he would never stoop to such a thing. He then began to attack him, saying that he would never do such a thing. Yang Yu-bin shouted that the man who accused him of theft was definitely lying. His friends tried to restrain him, and someone else appeared in the room. He tried to explain and prove that he had nothing to do with the situation. Then he said that if Yang Yu-bin intended to continue behaving this way, he'd better go home. As he was leaving, he said that he thought nothing could be worse than his past life. But then he added that nothing could be worse than today. And then when Na Min-soo met him, he said that after his disappearance, everything went haywire. Then Na Min-soo said that he wanted to apologize to him earlier, but he couldn't find a way to contact him. And then Yang Yu-bin said that Na Min-soo had abandoned him and now dared to return and make the situation worse. Then Yang Yu-bin rushed at him, saying that he could never forgive him. Then Yang Yu-bin said that he had no intention of letting him smooth things over. Na Min-soo explained that he had been kicked out only because he had hit one of the gang members out of anger, not for stealing. But Yang Yu-bin was convinced that he had simply been used for their own purposes and then discarded. When Na Min-soo tried to strike back, Yang Yu-bin wrapped his arm in some kind of rope and pulled him toward him. Meanwhile, during their fight, orders were given to destroy everyone else. Na Min-soo felt this rope on his arm, like a hunter's trap that dug into his skin and restricted his movements. And then, in order to try to win, he decided to get rid of part of his body. Yang Yu-bin said that he deliberately tied his left hand so that his right hand would become completely useless. Yang Yu-bin shouted that Na Min-soo was now incapable of protecting anyone and that he had been in this state from the very beginning. He said that their words were very different from their actions and called them all traitors. For him, his family used to mean only that he was beaten simply for looking them in the eye and was neglected. And when he saw happy families on TV, he just dreamed of disappearing. And after some events, he realized that Incheon was also pretending to be the most miserable in the world and protecting each other under the guise of a family. Then he just wanted to destroy all their happy lives. But then Na Min-soo instilled hope in him, and he was scared and sometimes felt happy. But it turned out that hope was just another reason for his torment. And then, during their fight, Na Min-soo apologized to him again, hoping to settle their conflict. He apologized, but said that their fight was now ruining his family's life. And then he said that he didn't think he could afford to lose this battle. At the moment of their fight, Yang Yu-bin realized that Na Min-soo had gotten too close to him, and now the wire on his arm was completely useless. He thought that if this continued, he would simply lose his advantage. It wasn't long before Na Min-soo was able to immobilize it, and he didn't have time to understand how it happened. Their fight continued, and Na Min-soo was definitely one step ahead. Yang Yu-bin did not understand how Na Min-soo had become so strong. When Yang Yu-bin decided to throw his opponent down, Na Min-soo held on to the top and tried to keep his opponent from falling into the abyss. Na Min-soo then shouted and asked his opponent not to move, because if he fell, he would simply drown. Yang Yu-bin shouted back that he would rather die than receive help from a traitor like Na Min-soo. Na Min-soo then turned to Yang Yu-bin and said that he probably understood what he intended to do. He then began to pull Yang Yu-bin up, saying that they both had to survive. But Yang Yu-bin still could not completely trust Na Min-soo and asked him to stop pretending. But at some point, the wire broke, and Yang Yu-bin fell into the water. Na Min-soo did not abandon his opponent, and without hesitation, dived after him into the life-threatening depths. Na Min-soo managed to save him, and they both surfaced. Na Min-soo was able to swim with him to shore, expending a great deal of energy. When Yang Yu-bin came to, he was extremely surprised to see Na Min-soo lying next to him, seemingly exhausted. But it turned out that Donghua had also appeared and knocked Na Min-soo unconscious. Donghua turned to his comrade and said that even though he had fought well, he had become too kind. He asked Donghua what he meant, because at that moment, Yang Yu-bin didn't understand much. And then he said that if Yang Yu-bin was so weak, he simply couldn't trust him anymore. Yang Yu-bin started yelling at him, asking why he had betrayed him, and suggested that he had simply been threatened. But he replied that they were simply trying to make money. Then Yang Yu-bin burst into hysterical laughter and couldn't stop. He laughed because he realized that Donghua was capable of selling his family for money. Then, hitting him on the head, he said that it was only something like a family. Then Donghua called Yang Yu-bin useless, and told him not to move if he didn't want to get hit in the back. And then Na Min-soo and Yang Yu-bin remained lying on the shore, seemingly unconscious. When the news became known to the leader of their group, they ran to her and reported this betrayal. She told them not to make any noise, because she had heard everything. She said she had been short-sighted in her life, and that it would be easier to betray and strike back. She asked her to look at the aquarium, and pointed out that she had never fed the fish in it before. Then she asked her what she thought the reasons for this behavior might be. She said that this species of fish is special, but they have neither enemies nor allies. She said that these fish are very similar to humans in some ways. Meanwhile, Donghua was at a meeting with those traders who praised him for a job well done. Then one of them filled the glasses and suggested that the others celebrate the occasion. Donghua stopped his hand and said that they had no time for entertainment. He said that they needed to get to Park Han-yoon as soon as possible and set up an organization. Then that man agreed with Donghua and said that they really needed to deal with Park Han-yoon as soon as possible. After that, he said that they needed to start with Oh Jun-woo, because without Park Han-yoon's money, he would not be so powerful. Hearing this, Donghua assumed that dealing with Oh Jun-woo would be extremely difficult. Then he was told that there was no point in worrying about it, because he would be able to take care of everything himself. Meanwhile, something happened in Oh Jun-woo's organization, and they urgently came to the office. Then Oh Jun-woo was told that there were probably those who were deliberately interfering in his business. He was given a condition that he had to pay 50 million won by tomorrow. Oh Jun-woo then realized that he had simply been caught off guard and caught. Then the blonde woman appeared and told Oh Jun-woo that she could lend him the necessary amount. When they realized that they had probably dealt with Oh Jun-woo, they decided to go after Park Han-yoon. Then he asked his comrades if they were ready for the upcoming battle with Park Han-yoon. And then those guys said with absolute confidence in their eyes that they were ready to fight him. Suddenly, a video message came to his phone, and he didn't immediately understand what it could be. It was a video of him behaving in a completely inappropriate manner. He got angry and didn't understand who could have sent him such a provocative video message with threats. And then he suddenly realized that it was most likely Lim Sung-ah. He was right, because immediately after this message, he received an incoming call on his phone. She said she had many similar videos and chose the one that would cause the least damage to send to him. And then, looking at her monitor screen, she began to talk aloud about what she could do to him and where to start. She blackmailed him and offered various options for distribution, including the help of reporters. And then, realizing that there was always a bug everywhere, he asked what she wanted in exchange for her silence, and she responded to his question with a proposal to meet to discuss all the details. It wasn't long before their meeting took place, and he assumed that she just wanted to play with him. Then he said that if she intended to fight, he would be interested to see who would lose first. She replied, pointing out that he definitely did not expect this from her when he betrayed her. Then Oh Jun-woo appeared in their company and asked what his prize would be if he won. And then he suggested that she just wanted to brag that she and Oh Jun-woo had teamed up. Oh Jun-woo then said that he had invited him to make him an offer. He then said that if they fought separately for their common dreams, only one of them could win. He looked at Oh Jun-woo with distrust and waited for an explanation of what he had just said. He then suggested that they pursue their common goal without fighting each other. He suggested that the losing side be allowed to leave without any losses. Oh Jun-woo then said that he was confident of victory because he had money, power, and confidence in this victory. They then agreed to meet at the stadium in 3 days, where both could bring any number of people. Later, a discussion began between them about whether Oh Jun-woo was confident in his abilities. The girl then said that the reason they intended to create an organization was to gain complete control. She also explained that if they lost, Oh Jun-woo would simply risk losing everything he had at that moment. Oh Jun-woo then said that he was sure that the other side would want to bring in as many participants as possible. But despite the numbers, he was still confident that they were no match for Park Han-yoon's power. Suddenly, a frightened Cho So-hyun ran into the office and reported that Park Han-yoon was missing. Then Oh Jun-woo remembered his last conversation with Park Han-yoon and realized that he had to find him. He then told Cho So-hyun that 3 days should be more than enough to find him. Cho So-hyun asked what would happen if she couldn't find him. Kim Dong-hyun said that they would fight anyway because he was sure they couldn't lose. Oh Jun-woo replied that no matter how strong Kim Dong-hyun was, they couldn't win without Park Han-yoon. Kim Dong-hyun then said that he was not alone because someone had appeared whom they could ask for help in this matter. Oh Jun-woo turned around questioningly because he did not understand who Kim Dong-hyun was referring to. And then, after the meeting, Cho So-hyun and Kim Dong-hyun came to the store of her admirer named Jong Jo-hyun. When she asked him for a favor, Her love for Cho So-hyun once again clouded her judgment. Before their battle, everyone on that side received a speech and instruction that this battle should show how desperate they were. Meanwhile, Yang Yu-bin woke up in the hospital and gradually came to his senses. Imagine his surprise when he saw Na Min-soo standing in front of him, jokingly asking if they should continue living. Na Min-soo then came to him with a smile on his face to find out how Yang Yu-bin was doing. But Yang Yu-bin immediately changed his expression and told him to leave because he could see perfectly well what had happened. Na Min-soo turned around and said that he was going to do it anyway, despite his request to leave. Na Min-soo then noticed that Yang Yu-bin no longer had any friends, so he offered to buy him some food. He said that there were now many more people in their family, and that there were even spare rooms in their enlarged house. He explained that he was ready to treat him now, and suggested that he repay him when he came to visit them. He was already approaching the exit, and reminded Yang Yu-bin that he knew very well where he could find them. Meanwhile, Oh Jun-woo was desperately searching for Park Han-yoon. Finally, he was able to find him by the sound Park Han-yoon made. Oh Jun-woo asked what he was doing here when a huge number of people were waiting for him, but Park Han-yoon seemed not to hear him and continued his training, striking an improvised wall. When Oh Jun-woo saw that Park Han-yoon was able to break through the incredibly thick wall from the other side, he was simply amazed. Chu So-hyun was with the blonde woman at the time and asked if they had managed to find Park Han-yoon's location. Suddenly, a huge crowd of people appeared at the stadium, confidently heading for the battlefield. The leader of their group immediately began asking about Park Han-yoon, hoping to see him. John Jo-hyun turned to Kim Dong-hyun and said that he had never seen so many opponents. He noted that he had noticed the unusual eyes of his opponents. He found the guy whose eyes were closed to be extremely unusual. And about the guys in sportswear, he said that their eyes seemed dangerous to him. Kim Dong-hyun then said that it was finally time to see how much he had grown in boxing. And then John Jo-hyun realized that if it was necessary for his lady, he simply couldn't let her down. And then the opponents immediately gave the order to attack the two guys. Our heroes were in no way inferior to them in strength, and began to fight actively. Realizing that they simply would not have a second chance for such a battle, they knew they had to do everything right the first time. The blonde then said that she was worried that they outnumbered them, but realized she was wrong. She noted that the guys were doing well, even without Park Han-yoon. Chu So-hyun then said that they shouldn't relax, because the real battle hadn't started yet. The fact is that the battle is now between the two leaders. But in reality, it was just an illusion created by Donghua. In reality, Donghua was a psychopath who saw people only as tools. Kim Dong-hyun then addressed him as a traitor and said he would deal with him in the blink of an eye. Kim Dong-hyun noticed that Donghua was using his comrades as a shield to protect himself. After a few blows, Kim Dong-hyun realized that his eyes were blurred with blood and he couldn't see clearly. Then, Kim Dong-hyun was captured because the other side was playing a completely unfair game, using weapons in their battle. Suddenly, a guy entered the crowd who caught the attention of everyone there. It was Park Han-yoon, who was furious beyond belief, brought by Oh Jun-woo. Out of fear, many began to feel their bodies instantly turn to stone. All this time, Park Han-young had been training his hammer attack, which was capable of defeating even the strongest opponent. And when the order was given to attack Park Han-young, all the attackers instantly scattered like feathers from a pillow. Suddenly, Park Han-young was approached and reminded of the rumors circulating about him, comparing him to a beast. Then he was told that despite his strength, he was still too weak to oppose them. And then, after these words, Park Han-young fell into a rage and rushed at his opponents with an attack. Park Han-yoon decided to deal with his opponent using his usual techniques. His opponent realized that Park Han-yoon's movements had changed and that he had become much more serious than before. At that moment, his opponent said that they were quite similar, but reminded him of the rules of competition. Suddenly, Park Han-young got too close to him and said that their games were over. And then they began to realize that they were most likely losing to Park Han-young in strength. They then understood that Park Han-young's next attack could simply be their last. The leaders yelled at them that if they refused to fight, they would lose all sponsorship and support. So they decided to try again to defeat Park Han-young and headed straight for him once more. But at the same time, they understood that Park Han-young was a man of a completely different nature. Among them was the best 100-meter runner in Korea, who was just an athlete practicing an unpopular sport. And despite all his efforts, the environment was disgusting, and therefore his future was bleak. Then he thought that by changing the environment, they could show the world what they were capable of. And around that time, Park Ji-woo appeared on the scene. He generously rewarded them all in exchange for dirty work. In this way, He only wanted to help those who dreamed of achieving their cherished goals. But it turned out that it wasn't just about the environment or anything like that. The thing was, it was all just an excuse to hide his own shortcomings. And then he realized that when he hit rock bottom, he felt a very strange sense of relief. Jiwoo was disappointed in him and asked him not to act as if everything was over for him, because too much was at stake. He yelled at him and asked him to get up immediately and continue the fight. But suddenly he got up, grabbed him by the hair, and asked why he suddenly decided he could hit him. He asked why he was so sure that there would be no counterattack against him after that. After that, Donghua realized that even if he could defeat Kim Dong-hyun, their battle was already over. Then he realized that he needed to think about what to do next, and he knelt down and said that he had lost. But Kim Dong-hyun didn't even listen and hit him again. Then he started crawling back, saying he was ready to give up. Park Han-yoon joined them, and Cho So-hyun, watching this, yelled at Park to stop. Then they yelled at him that it was a violation because it had been agreed upon in their dispute. Park Han-yoon said he knew that, but reminded them that he personally had not promised them anything, such as following the terms of the agreement. Then, in complete terror, he tearfully begged them to stop. And then Park Han-yoon remembered his teacher's words, telling him not to fight with someone who didn't want to. His teacher had taught him that this was the responsibility of strong people, but at that moment, Park didn't care. Then threats began to arrive, saying that if Park took one more step, his life would be ruined forever. Park Han-yoon concluded that his opponent still wanted to fight him. He began to run away, saying that he was not afraid of Park Han-yoon and promised to destroy his life. It wasn't long before Park Han-yoon caught up with him and said that he would hardly be able to do what he wanted. Then he started the machine that launches tennis balls and set it to full power. The opponent was terrified by the speed with which Park Han-yoon was hitting the balls flying at it. When Park Han-yoon grabbed him, he started screaming and begging for forgiveness because he did not want to die. Park Han-yoon approached him and asked again if he wanted to continue their fight. While Park Han-yoon held his jaw, he tried to say that he absolutely did not want to continue the fight. On that day, Park Han-yoon was victorious again, and Oh Jun-woo had predicted this outcome. Meanwhile, Lee Dong-ho was in his office and realized that everything he had planned was going according to plan. Then he came to Jeon Soo-hyun and said that his time had finally come. He said that power is built on trust and psychological fear that a group instills. He said that this fear arises when two extremely important circumstances are present. At that moment, they were told that the preparations were complete, and then he said that it was time to begin the operation. Meanwhile, Oh Jun-woo gathered all the members of his group in the office. Chu So-hyun was concerned about the two girls in their company. The blonde noticed that Cho So-hyun was trying to pick a fight with her every time. Oh Jun-woo told Chae So-hyun to shake her hand and accept the fact that she was now on their side. Oh Jun-woo said that no one knows more about Lee Dong-ho than Im Sung-ah. Im Sung-ah also pointed out that she has her own interest in this because she lent a lot of money to Oh Jun-woo, and it is important to her that they do not lose. After that, Cho So-hyun approached her and shook her hand, and Im Sung-ah noted that Cho had a pretty good personality. She began her story by saying that the organization originated from the most violent organization in South Korea. She said that in the past, this organization was involved in absolutely everything, including money and power. After some time, they managed to transform themselves from an ordinary gang into a huge corporation. Nevertheless, the main organization is still alive, with a leader who changes from generation to generation. For this generation, Lee Dong-ho leads and trains elite criminals. The fact is that this organization seeks out talented young people and, through rigorous training, turns them into living weapons. Oh Jun-woo noticed that some parts of her story seemed very strange to him. He couldn't understand why Nexus was created in the first place if there was a more powerful organization. It turned out that this was an opportunity for Ryan, who was second in line to the throne. Oh Jun-woo began to speculate aloud that for some reason, Lee Dong-ho was not satisfied with Nexus. The fact is that Kim Jong-soo is the strongest opponent among them. Park Han-yoon then spoke of him as a man whose power he had encountered for the first time in his life. And when Jung-soo was able to defeat many rivals at a young age, he was accepted into that organization. And then he realized that the word he was most familiar with was strongest. That day, they met with Lee Moon-kil, where they came face to face. That day, he asked Lee Jong-soo what had brought him to him. He then said that it was Nexus that had brought him here, and offered to do it again. Later, there was discussion about the news that an attack had been carried out on Muju during the night, and that a request for support had been received. Then their leader said that there were always many incidents in this place, and this time they wanted to punish those people. He began to say that the members of the organization were now far from Muju, but his statement was immediately dismissed. He was asked to have the children do it instead of the adults, because because they needed to gain experience. These were Gan Soo Hek and Ben Sok, numbers 2 and 3 of the Song San Elite. And at their head was number 1 of the Song San Elite, named Choi Ben Ho. After that, the attack was carried out, and that man said that their group would not ignore this situation. But the man leaned closer to him and said that if they were afraid of that, they would never have come to this place. Then he told him to shut up and immediately call the people from that group. Suddenly, 3 people appeared in the room and entered with the most serious expressions on their faces. One of them realized that these were the 3 trainees from Sun Sang's group, who had single-handedly destroyed Mount Masan. Then one of them said that they needed to stop talking and get it over with quickly. One of them suggested that they must all be crazy if they wanted to lose their lives so quickly. It didn't take long for all those scoundrels to be defeated, and the man they had attacked thanked them, saying that they could only trust them. Then one of them turned and said that this was his last warning. After they finished, they went out into the street, and then they received a call from their young master. At that moment, Cho Ben answered the phone and listened to him very carefully. The young master suggested that Cho Ben was trying to disgrace him with his action, and then he ordered Cho Ben Ho to come to him immediately for a conversation. It wasn't long before Cho Ben Ho found himself in his young master's office. Cho Ben then explained to him that he thought Park Han Yoon would be his rival, and that the others would deal with Kim Jong-soo. But he remained serious and reminded Cho Ben Ho that Ryan was his younger brother. He reminded him that no matter how incompetent he was still a tiger cub. That's why he told Cho Ben Ho to follow and analyze the enemy. Meanwhile, Lee Moon-kil and Jong-soo were talking about Jong-soo's request to recreate Nexus. Lee Moon-kil reminded him that Jong-soo had abandoned them in favor of his own success and that they were nothing to him. Then Jong-soo knelt down in a puddle and told Lee Moon-kil that he had indeed been selfish. He said he wanted to apologize because he only understood everything after it was all over. And continuing to kneel, he asked Lee Moon-kil for forgiveness. Lee Moon-kil then turned to Jong-soo and ordered him never to kneel again. He compared this sight to an insult to those who once followed him. Then Lee Moon-kil turned around and started to leave, simply because he had nothing more to say. Meanwhile, Jung-joon and Kim Dong-hyun were training. The coach said that Dong-hyun was fighting in order to put all his strength into his fists. Kim Dong-hyun realized that until then, he had been nothing but a burden to his friend Park Han Yoon. He then firmly decided that he would definitely contribute. Oh Jun-woo then said that now it was his one-on-one confrontation. He said that if they acted rashly, they would become an easy target, and if they were attacked when they were not ready, they would definitely lose. The blonde said that they could target Ryan because he seemed like an easy target to her. Oh Jun-woo thought about it and replied that this option was too risky. Then, Oh Jun-woo suggested waiting first and preparing for all possible scenarios. He hoped that either Jong-soo or Ryan would make a mistake, leaving them with no way out. Meanwhile, someone was waiting for Jong-soo around the corner of a dark alley. It turned out to be Cho Baek-hyun, who tried to attack him with a weapon. And then, before long, their battle began. Jong-soo was disappointed, because first there was the situation with Moon-gil, and now this guy was trying to attack him. During their fight, he thought that he really had been just a piece of trash before. His opponent didn't understand what was going on, because Jong-soo didn't even dodge his blow. Then Jong-soo simply grabbed his arm and quietly asked him to stop what he was doing. Jong-soo agreed with everything his opponent said, and said that he had indeed only been thinking about himself all this time. Then he handed him the weapon, and said that if it would make him feel better, he should just take his life right now. And then Jong-soo said that he would continue to stand still all this time. But his opponent thought that his opponent was just bluffing with such statements. But suddenly, his opponent threw the weapon on the floor and said that he couldn't be angry with him if he was like that. As he left, he said that he was just a person who made people unhappy until the very end. Park Han Yoon, meanwhile, continued to train in the gym. At that moment, someone was watching him closely, and finally they were able to find him. When Jong-soo was rejected and Park Han Yoon was training, they decided to find people and take action first. When Jong-soo came to his brother, he told him that he knew from the beginning that it would not be easy. Then he told his brother about his assumptions, that this was simply the end. Jong-soo then said that he did not intend to give up, even if it cost him his life. Later, the leader of the organization was informed about the start of an attack on them by Jong-soo. He understood that Nexus had absolutely no time to regroup, but then it turned out that Kim Jong-soo had come to them alone. They understood that Kim Jong-soo was a target that they simply had to destroy, and with Nexus regrouping, it would not be easy to do so. And then they compared his coming alone to his desire to take his own life. Meanwhile, rumors reached our heroes that Jong-soo had attacked the organization alone. After that, Oh Jun-woo told Cho So-hyun to gather everyone in the office to discuss the details. Oh Jun-woo understood perfectly well that the next battle would begin very soon, and when Kim Jong-soo defeated the bulk of the attackers, it was time to fight the elite of this organization. Kim Jong-soo understood and considered himself a nobody, but nevertheless, he was not going to give up and give in. Chong-soo's obsession with success grew every day, and he did not want to go through all this and not achieve success. And indeed, nothing else mattered to him. But nevertheless, he did not understand why he was thinking about those people who meant nothing to him in the last minutes of his life. Suddenly, Lee Moon-kil arrived and kicked the man who was attacking Jong-soo. He came and signaled their presence by saying that Nexus himself had arrived. One of them, addressing Jong-soo, said that this fight was too difficult for him, so they had come to his aid. And then he added that he never thought he would bow his head to him. Everyone else said that they were only here because of Ryan's appearance. Then another said that they didn't mind being bad guys, but they wouldn't tolerate shame. But Lee Moon-kil told Jong-soo not to rejoice because he was not yet completely forgiven. He told Jong-soo that now he had to prove to them that they had not believed in him in vain. He held the Nexus ring in his hand and said that this time he must not give up and see it through to the end. And this time, Kim Jong-soo promised his comrades that he would not let them down. Then, the #1 elite named Cho Ben-ho stood before them. Ryan then said that even though Jong-soo was his younger brother, Cho Ben was allowed to destroy Nexus. Ryan's order was immediately carried out, and they attacked him. But that was definitely not enough to catch Jong-soo off guard. He then tried to predict his opponent's every move again. The opponent then told Jong-soo that these were not just water insects, but a real wave. He called the revival of the collapsed Nexus a pity. Jong-soo then replied that they didn't stand a chance against him because he knew all their moves in advance. Jong-soo was surprised that his opponent was fighting without Park Han-yoon. Jeon-soo immediately remembered a mistake that could determine life and death. He thought about the moment when a wild dog almost took his life. And then, for the first time, he was able to read his opponent's intended movements. With this ability, everything in life came easily to Jong-soo, including games and battles. But that was definitely not enough to defeat Park Han-yoon. So he decided that he needed to learn more about his ability. He thought about it hundreds, even thousands of times, staring intently at the lion. He looked into the fierce eyes of the beast and felt its murderous intent. And that's when he understood what he had felt at that moment. The battle between Jong-soo and his opponent continued for a very long time in a fierce fight. Jong-soo then said that all animals have things that their bodies react to, even before they realized. For Chong-soo, it felt as if his opponent was standing in front of him with his eyes closed. And when Chong-soo told his opponent that he had lost, his opponent said that for him, defeat meant simply his death. In response, Chong-soo said that in that case, his opponent was destined to die in this battle. Both opponents were evenly matched in strength and continued to strike each other blow after blow. Jeon-soo then told his opponent that his hasty intervention would not solve anything. His opponent replied that even if such intervention did not solve anything, it could provide a good opportunity. He meant that endurance was important for a good fight. Moreover, in his opinion, the true value of endurance would be revealed at the end of their battle. Ryan then told his comrade that if he failed, he would simply get rid of him after the battle was over. But he was serious and had no intention of losing this battle. At the moment of their battle, Jeon-soo realized that his opponent possessed fierce tenacity. But it could be said that it was not even tenacity, but a kind of determination. Then the opponent said that he might not be able to defeat him, but he would not be able to do the same. Then he said that he was Cho Ben-ho, who could only be defeated in the event of his death. Suddenly, Ryan grabbed him by the shoulder and said that this was definitely enough. He ordered him to stop the fight because it would be a loss for both of them. Then he approached his brother and ordered him to serve only him from now on. Then he asked him to make a choice right now, without giving him time to think about it. And then Cho Ben-ho remembered a conversation with the leader, where he said that one day he would have to make a choice. And then he talked about choosing the most worthy of them to be his king. Even then, he understood that the strongest would be the one who would rule Sonsan with absolute power and give it more might. And then Cho Ben-ho was able to make up his mind and made the most important choice of his life in that very moment. His leader then said that he had no right to make such decisions because, in his opinion, Ben was just a slave who carried out orders. Then he turned to Lin Ho and asked if he could somehow fix the situation at that moment. He told his brother to pull himself together and accept that he was the only heir and no one else. He then said that if he were the only capable heir, their father would never have created Nexus. He then took up arms and said that he had simply taken advantage of the opportunity their father had given him. Then he put the weapon on his brother's shoulder and turned to him again with a demand to surrender. Then it was announced that from now on, Nexus and the Sonsan division would be one group under Ryan's command. They were all told that they had come a long way, and that in the end, this was simply an inevitable outcome. Then Ryan said that as a reward for all their hard work, he would take responsibility for each of their lives. And even then, he said that their next opponent was someone named Park Han-young. Chong-soo then thought to himself that he would finally meet Park Han-young again. Meanwhile, important matters were also being discussed in Oh Jun-woo's office. Then rumors reached them that Ryan had won, which meant that Nexus and the gangsters had joined forces. Chu So-hyun then pointed out that, although it was good for them that the two had fought each other, the situation had definitely become more complicated. The blonde then added that now, victory in battle would not be enough to end this dirty game. Of course, everyone was curious about what Oh Jun-woo was going to do next. Oh replied that he would have no problem spending all his money to end this, and told them to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, Ryan was considering his final move to victory. It was at this moment that Oh Jun-woo arrived for their meeting. Ryan then told Oh that he was doing things that were simply shameful to watch. He brought with him a suitcase full of documents confirming each of their illegal activities. After that, Oh Jun-woo suggested that he conduct a real debriefing, but Ryan was not intimidated and, taking the suitcase with the documents, simply opened it and threw it straight down from the roof. Ryan said that their group's influence extended to all corners of Korea, and that he could not be intimidated by Oh Jun-woo's threats. Then, Oh Jun-woo said that he was ready to put all his shares on the line, and then he promised that if he lost, he would never speak out against Sonsin again. And then he suggested that he stop delaying the decision, and finally agree to his terms, and settle this once and for all. Ryan then pointed out that they were both going all in, which he found quite interesting. He asked Oh Jun-woo if he was willing to bet his friend's house, which was as precious to Oh as a memory. After that, Ryan said that he had always liked things with a story behind them. Realizing that Oh Jun-woo agreed, Ryan said that he would choose the location. Oh Jun-woo said that their battle would take place in 3 days at his company's location. Ryan then said that he would look forward to that moment. Then, many people received a message about remote work on internal construction. The blonde then told Oh Jun-woo that he was truly the most capable person she had ever met. Then she became curious to know if he felt relieved as the moment he had so desperately dreamed of approached. And remembering his friend, he realized that it was pointless to rejoice over something that had not yet happened. And then he replied that all he could do now was to put things in order. He looked into the distance and said that everything else depended only on Park Han-yoon and his group. Meanwhile, Na Min-soo was released from the hospital, noting that he never liked hospital food. Yang Gyu-bin then turned to Na Min-soo and asked if he had heard the latest news. He said he had heard that Na Min-soo owed Oh Jun-woo, and then he asked if Incheon really needed to get involved in this matter. Na Min-soo replied that he really did owe him. He explained that it was no secret that Incheon had contributed to the development of Nexus, but added that he considered it the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Cho So-hyun was in her admirer's shop, telling him stories from their past. After that, Cho So-hyun asked him what he intended to do next. Cho So-hyun then said that he had the right to refuse to participate in such a dangerous venture, and that no one was forcing him. He replied that he had more than enough reasons to fight for Cho So-hyun. She replied that he was very strange, but despite that, she liked him, but she did not love him. At the moment of their conversation, people from the Kangsu District Alliance approached the store. At the same time, Kim Dong-hyun and Park Han-yoon were standing together, and his friend asked him to win this time too. And finally, the day of the final battle between the dangerous groups arrived. A contract was placed before the leaders of the two groups, stating that the losing side would give up everything they had. The first condition for victory was to be the first to occupy the roof of the building. The second condition was to defeat the enemy if both sides occupied the roof. The fight would begin when the clock struck 12, and until that happened, the representatives of the gangs had to climb up. Oh Jun-woo addressed his guys and said that they had been through a lot. Then he said that today would mark the end of this reckless struggle. And then he asked them to fight for victory so that none of them would have any regrets afterwards. In response, Park Han-young said that he would never allow their company to lose. Ryan encouraged his group by saying that if they won, they would be able to manipulate everything as they saw fit. Then he ordered them not to show any mercy and to do their best. And when the clock struck 12, the final battle began, and everyone rushed forward. Oh Jun-woo understood that the building had 34 floors, including the roof, and that they could take the elevator up to the 32nd floor. He predicted that Ryan's group would try to take over the elevators from the very beginning. That's why, according to their plan, the guys from Incheon had to block at least one elevator. Meanwhile, Lee Moon-kil thought that everything would go more smoothly than they had imagined. But those they considered ordinary extras had been developing all this time and had no intention of giving up. And then Ryan's men lost their vigilance and, fighting on the first floor, allowed Park's men to take the elevator from the upper floors. The man who was defending the elevator at the time of the battle weighed 273 kilograms and said that no one was allowed to go upstairs. Even after Park Han-yoon and his company went upstairs, Jung-soo said that the real battle was just beginning. When Jung-soo arrived upstairs by elevator, he was met by Nam In-soo. Lee Moon-kil then told Jung-soo that he could go upstairs and promised to take care of Nam In-soo. Nam In-soo then asked Lee Moon-kil if he had accidentally returned to Nexus. He then attacked him, noting that he did not know that he had no sense of self-respect. In response, Lee Moon-kil said that now he had a great opportunity to teach the traitor Nam In-soo a lesson. Meanwhile, on their way, Jung-soo and his company met Kim Dong-hyun and Jong-joon, and his company told him to go up alone. Then Jong-joon and Kim Dong-hyun launched an attack on their rivals. When Jung-soo-hyun reached the end, he saw a door and realized that behind it was everything he could ever dream of. And when they both appeared on the roof, their final battle truly began. As he approached, Jong-soo felt his hands shaking violently. Then he realized that what he was feeling was not fear, but simply excitement. He told Park Han-yoon that his body felt like it was going crazy, as if welcoming him, and said he was glad to see his opponent. Then Jung-soo told his opponent that he was not the same person he used to be. As the battle between Lee Moon-kil and Nam In-soo continued, he said that he had made a mistake leaving Nexus, because then his life would have turned out differently. Kim Dong-hyun then said that he was just trash, saying this with absolute confidence. And then their battle continued for a long time, and with fierce fighting. Park felt an unpleasant feeling that he had experienced the last time they fought, and it became more distinct. Then, Jung-soo asked Park Han-yoon to show him the power he could feel before. Oh Jun-woo understood that something was wrong with Jun-woo's body today. Oh Jun-woo then assumed that Jeon-soo had indeed become strong, and then Oh Jun-woo shouted to Park Han-yoon that this was their final battle, and that he had to give it his all. Jeon-soo looked at his opponent and asked him to show him what he had prepared as soon as possible. From Park Han-yoon's blows, Jung-soo understood that he was not the same person he used to be, because his attacks simply made his ears ring. Jung-soo tried to analyze his opponent's blows, and realized that Park Han-yoon had not yet fully mastered this technique. Oh Jun-woo then realized that his father had taught him this technique, and it was very different from the one Park used, which is why its power was inconsistent. And then Oh Jun-woo's hope was focused solely on Park Han-yoon's last blow. Jong-soo was still trying to analyze his opponent's action, and understood that problems could arise if he let his guard down. When Jeon-soo delivered an extremely powerful attack to Park Han-yoon, he was curious to see if he had shown everything he had in the fight. Then he looked Park Han-yoon straight in the eye and said that he had lost interest in him and asked to end their fight right now. But Park Han-yoon said that Jeon-soo would have to wait for 3 more correct strikes, after which he would have to change his mind. The fact was that Park Han-yoon already had his own unique and established style, and he thought it was impossible to adapt to a new style. But despite all this, Park Han-yoon did not give up and continued to train. And when he succeeded for the first time, he realized one very important thing. He understood why his father had taught him this particular technique. When Jeon-soo was suddenly thrown by Park Han-young, Park said that it was the first of those 3 strikes. Meanwhile, on the 32nd floor, the fierce battle continued. Lee Moon-kil then assumed that they were just trying to buy time. Lee Moon-kil was then sure that they would not be able to hold out, because half of their guys had not yet come up. Then, Nam In-soo was able to see Yang Yu-bin among the men who were there, and was extremely surprised. Yang Yu-bin then joined Nam In-soo, and Kim Dong-hyun realized that they were facing a very strong opponent and asked Park to hurry up. Looking at his opponent, Kim Dong-hyun was not at all confident of victory. Meanwhile, Jung-soo pondered Park Han-yoon's blows and thought about what else he could prepare for. After that, their fierce struggle continued even more intensely. When Jeon-soo managed to damage Park Han-yoon's ear with his attacks, he assumed that his opponent was finished. Park Han-yoon then realized that he was beginning to lose his balance from the blow. Everything in Park Han-yoon's eyes was blurry, and he could hardly focus his gaze on his opponent. Cho-soo noted that Park Han-yoon was already struggling to defend himself, and now it was even funny to see him trying to stand up straight. At that very moment, Oh Jun-woo was informed that the first floor of the building had been surrendered, and that all these people would soon be coming up to them. Meanwhile, on the 32nd floor of the building, things were not going smoothly either. Nam In-soo told Yang Yu-bin that they needed to run, and they rushed up the stairs to the upper floors. Nam In-soo decided to change their plans because he realized that now they would have to fight all of them. Nam In-soo understood that this battle, comparing it to dominoes, would continue until the 33rd floor collapsed. Kim Dong-hyun and Cho Jung decided to do exactly the same thing. When Lee Moon-kil approached the entrance to the roof, he saw our heroes blocking the way and did not understand why they had not gone to help Park. Nam In-soo then said that they were being ridiculous, trying to win by sheer numbers. Kim Dong-hyun then told them that they trusted Park Han-yoon and believed in his victory, unlike them. Meanwhile, Park Han-yoon continued to strike Jong-soo, who couldn't understand why he couldn't predict the blows. After that, Park Han-yoon grabbed his opponent by the hair and said that it didn't matter to him what he couldn't see. He told Jung-soo that he had replayed that battle and the atmosphere of that day thousands of times. Then, as he struck him, Park Han-yoon said that he wasn't the only one with that ability. After that, Park Han-yoon said that now he had to deliver the last and final decisive blow. Jung-soo understood that his body had suffered great damage and understood that Park Han-yoon felt the same. Then Jung-soo also understood that he simply could not lose and had to hold on until the very end. And as they continued to fight with all their might, Woo Jun-woo shouted Park Han-yoon's name at the top of his lungs. Kim Dong-hyun then heard his voice and told Jung-jung that their battle was probably coming to an end. They decided that it was necessary to let them fight one-on-one, and then Park Han-yoon would surely win. Kim Dong-hyun then shouted to him from behind the door and asked him to hold on a little longer in the hope that everything would work out. Ryan's men still did not give up trying to break through the door in order to help Jung-soo, and when they tried to break through from the other side, the door was finally opened. Park Han-yoon then used his punch, putting 100% of his effort into it. After that blow, Jung-soo simply collapsed, completely drained of strength. As Jung-soo lay on the ground, he tried to reflect on the past. He tried to understand at what point everything could have gone wrong. He then looked up at the sky and realized that he had made the best choice of his life. He understood that his only mistake was fighting Park Han-yoon. Ryan then realized that Kim Jong-soo had lost and thought about how he could save at least a little money. When Park Han-yoon attacked Ryan, Oh Jun-woo stopped him. Oh Jun-woo then reminded Ryan that their contract had been carefully prepared and that even in the event of a trial, everything would be above board. Ryan replied that he was not going to forget what had happened that night. When they were alone, Oh Jun-woo asked Park about one important day. He was talking about the day when they started this whole business with him in the company. He reminded him of the conversation about his relief and gratitude for letting off steam. Oh Jun-woo then said that he was the one who should be grateful to Park Han-yoon for everything that had happened. And that evening, their battle came to an end. A few months later, Ryan transferred all his assets to Oh Jun-woo, as he had promised. Oh Jun-woo, in turn, used part of these funds to repay the debt to the blonde woman who had helped them so much. Im Jong-soo underwent a long course of treatment and recovery after the battle with Park Han-yoon. After that, he seemed to have simply been wiped off the face of the earth and disappeared. The remaining members of the Nexus group disappeared with him. Extremely slowly and gradually, peace was restored in Korea, which our heroes had desperately sought. Meanwhile, Oh Jun-woo talked to the portrait of his best friend. He told his friend that he did not feel relieved, but had decided to accept the situation. He said that he could not simply forget everything, otherwise he would have to forget his friend. Then he said that he no longer intended to return to that house because he had avenged him sufficiently. After Oh Jun-woo's last visit there, they decided to tear down the house. After that, Park Han-yoon and Oh Jun-woo met on the street, and Park Han-yoon asked him what he was going to do next. Oh Jun-woo said that he intended to just live for tomorrow. Meanwhile, peace reigned in all schools, and even Kim Dong-hyun passed the entrance exam to the college's physical education department. Although his grades were low, he surpassed everyone with his physical skills. Choi So-hyun began preparing for the qualifying exam, and even though studying was quite difficult for her, a good teacher helped her not to give up. After that, Jung Jong quit his job and joined his father's company. Na Min-soo returned to his hometown of Incheon after what happened. He also brought a new member of his family named Yang Gyu-bin there. Yang Gyu-bin was definitely worried about this, but Na Min-soo said that once he came to Incheon, he would stay there forever. As for Oh Jun-woo, the blonde reminded him that it was over, and he could do whatever he wanted. Oh Jun-woo didn't understand why she was still around him. And then the two of them decided to go on a trip around the world and get married in the future. Park Han-yoon had nothing to do but box. Sometimes he spent his free time sitting motionless. This continued until he decided to go to his father and tell him that he intended to become a fighter. In the end, the lives of each of our heroes began to go smoothly and more or less happily, with each choosing a career that suited them.